Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to MEA's first virtual annual conference. My name is Salim Alibai. I'm currently the MEA president, well, until Thursday's annual general meeting when we elect a new president. My day job is I'm a director, capital planning and delivery in the Transportation Services Department of York Region. Last year, we were all struggling with what was happening around us and trying to figure out our personal lives and work. Some of us working from home and having to deal with spouses and children all at home at the same time, 24/7. Or those of you who had to physically go into work and figure out how to do that safely. What to do with the kids because daycares and schools were closed, etc. We quickly learned how to adapt to the public health guidelines and restrictions. Zoom became our best friend, and their stock price went through the roof, and some people made a lot of money. I missed out on that one. Our records show the tradition of holding an annual workshop began 61 years ago in 1960. Although we did not have a conference last year, we did have a virtual annual general meeting with some speeches and awards. So again, welcome to this first annual conference. And quite frankly, I do hope this is the last virtual conference, We at the board did not want another year to go by without us having a conference. And that's how today you're participating in the 61st annual conference and AGM. However, we also thought it is never the same as an in-person meeting. So the board also decided this summer that we would go out on a limb and plan for an in-person president's banquet so that we can at least meet each other for one evening of food, drinks, networking, and fun. Of course, we have worked very hard with the hotel to ensure we follow all public health guidelines and protocols. We do hope to see many of you Friday evening, and I truly look forward to a fun night. The theme of this conference is The Odyssey Continues, a long, eventful, and adventurous journey. We thought this would be appropriate considering the theme of the workshop 20 years ago when we had the workshop in Mississauga in 2001. The theme then was an engineering odyssey. When we look over the past 20 years at our journey, our profession, our careers as municipal engineers, and what more than to look at just the last 20 months of the pandemic, it has definitely been an odyssey. Recognizing everyone has day jobs and sitting through a conference virtually through a device can be challenging, we have split the conference over a few days. I'll quickly run through the program, which you can download from the MEA website. Today, Monday and Wednesday are full days, 9 to 11:45 and 1:30 to 4 p.m. are the sessions, with breaks during the morning and afternoon sessions, and a lunch hour networking session to visit our sponsors and play trivia games on the Kahoot platform. The trivia game will start at 1 p.m. and you'll find the link on the attendee hub. I wanted to let you know there are some decent prizes as well in the trivia game for all the first, second, and third place winners. The last session of the presentations will be on Thursday from 9 to 11 a.m. Be sure not to miss the annual general meeting on Thursday at 11. Please note the AGM is only open to MEA members. And finally, the President's Banquet on Friday from 6 to 1 a.m., complete with dinner, speeches, awards, and the hospitality suite. I truly hope you'll enjoy the program and benefit from the session. All presentations will be saved and will be available on MEA's website for future reference. Please also note that all delegates who have joined into the sessions will be receiving a certificate by email, denoting the professional development hours. This can be helpful for claiming training hours, I personally have used them for my PMP training over the past few years. We rely on conference registration and sponsorships to bring this programming to you. You can find the names of all our sponsors, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum sponsors in the conference booklet. As I mentioned before, there'll be breaks throughout the morning and afternoon sessions and during the lunch hour and at the end of the day. Please use these breaks to visit the virtual booths of our sponsors. You can find the virtual trade floor by clicking on the exhibitors button on the top menu of the attendee hub. By the way, you can visit the exhibitors anytime, 24/7 at your convenience through the hub. We are thankful to all our sponsors, but in particular, I wanted to mention the gold and platinum sponsors. The gold sponsors are Geranium Homes, Marionville Developments, Tridel, Tatham Engineering, and Walker Construction. And now I'll mention the platinum sponsors. At the platinum level, we have Advanced Drainage Systems, Bilterra, and Concrete Ontario. Thank you again to all our sponsors. We'll be showcasing one platinum sponsor on each of the conference days. Today's platinum sponsor is Concrete Ontario. I want to now take this opportunity to share a pre-recorded video message from Concrete Ontario.
Good morning, my name is Alan Carey and I'm the Director of Technical Services at Concrete Ontario, and we are very excited to be sponsoring and taking part in the 2021 MEA Conference and AGM. This year's conference theme is The Odyssey Continues, a long, eventful, and adventurous journey. And it could not be a more fitting theme based on everything that has been happening over the last year and a half. As many of you, we were hoping that this year's MEA Conference would be in person so that we can reconnect the industry and MEA representatives, but a virtual conference will have to do. Hopefully the banquet can still serve as an opportunity to meet some of you. Thank you to the Municipal Engineers Association for having us, and I would like to take this opportunity to preview what is new in the concrete world. Before we get to the hot topics, a little bit about Concrete Ontario. Concrete Ontario, also known as the Ready Mix Concrete Association of Ontario, was formed in 1959 to act in the best interest of Ontario's ready mix concrete producers and the industry in general. We represent approximately 96% of all concrete production and manufacture in Ontario. As part of our plant and truck certification program, we look after 270 certified concrete plants, along with approximately 3,700 trucks. Basically, if you need concrete in Ontario, our members will be involved with full support from the association. We pride ourselves in bringing education, technologies, research, and innovation to municipalities, architects, designers, and contractors, and continually promote concrete sustainable advantages and benefits to society. Now, I would like to start off with the hottest topic of all, low carbon concrete. We have all heard the statistic that concrete has a contribution of approximately 8% in terms of CO2 output worldwide, and therefore we could not be more pleased to announce that Concrete Ontario and its members are proud to support the pledge made by Concrete Canada and the Cement Association of Canada to help the sector reach net zero carbon concrete by 2050. This announcement was first made by the Global Concrete and Cement Association in October, where they unveiled their roadmap to net zero. In Canada, the plan is already in motion on the federal, provincial, and soon to be on the municipal level, and Concrete Ontario is fully committed in supporting municipalities to do their own part. The Canadian roadmap is currently being drafted and will be shared with the industry in the coming months. Through the Ontario Good Roads Association Liaison Committee, which consists of numerous municipal representatives, contractors, ready-mix suppliers, consultants, associations, and even academia, we will be creating a new guideline to help to educate municipalities about low-carbon concrete. This committee has been very active in producing valuable documents for municipalities as shown on your screen, and it will once again take the lead to help educate municipal representatives through webinars, lunch and learns, and finally through a new guideline about low carbon concrete. The new guideline is currently being drafted and will be available in early 2022. Its focus will be on outlining where the carbon from cement and concrete comes from, as well as the industry commitment previously outlined regarding net zero concrete by 2050. In addition, it will also cover different methods of reducing embodied carbon in concrete and the importance of environmental product declarations, also known as EPDs. Numerous virtual and in-person lunch and learns are already being scheduled to update municipalities about the importance of sustainability. Another important initiative for Concrete Ontario is municipal exterior flatwork, as we continue to see issues seen on the left. Scaling, mortar flaking, and pop-outs are still a problem, and we want to continue to promote best practices and the latest specifications so we see the results on the right. To help with this education and outreach, we're thrilled to announce an Ontario-specific course for exterior flatwork, also known as the Municipal Exterior Flatwork Certification Program. It is fully recognized in the sidewalk, curb, and pavement specifications in OPSS as of this month. It has been created for municipal inspectors, on-site supervisors, and even laborers, and numerous sessions will be hosted in early 2022. Finally, we would like to encourage all municipalities to submit projects to the 3rd Annual Municipal Concrete Award from OGRA. The winner will be recognized at the OGRA convention in February. Thank you again to the MEA for putting on this great event, and please feel free to reach out at the email address above or visit our Concrete Ontario virtual booth if you have any concrete-related questions. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you again to our platinum sponsor for today, Concrete Ontario. Before we get into presentations, I want to thank the organizing committee. As you know, we usually have the conference somewhere in Ontario, and the host city or town organizes the technical presentations, the fun events, the activities, and welcomes us to their municipality. In this case, it is a virtual conference, and therefore, to plan this event, the MEA board had to assemble a team of key individuals who have experience in organizing MEA conferences in the past. I want to take this opportunity to thank the organizing committee. In no particular order, Amanda Froese of the town of Saugeen Shores, David Mango of the regional municipality of York, Matthew Medema of the city of Thunder Bay, Reg Ruswam of the city of Guelph, Saidur Rahman of the city of Toronto. And of course, with the help of our two staff, our member services coordinator, Amin Niena, and our executive director, Dan Cozy. They have planned a fabulous program for this week, which I hope you will enjoy. Okay, so let's get into the presentations. Time check, we're doing well, 9:14. So we have 5 presentations this morning. Each will be around 15 to 20 minutes, followed by a 10-minute Q&A session. You are requested to please submit your questions through the hub. You'll find the Q&A button on the top right of your screen. So we'll start with the first presentation. The topic is Bass Pro Mills Environment Assessment Study Showcase, Challenges and Opportunities. We have 3 speakers, Hilda Esadebe, Peter Holiva, and Diana Adley. Hilda is a transportation project manager in the City of Vaughan's Transportation Planning and Engineering Division. Most of her career, Hilda has been in the consulting sector working on highway and municipal road planning and engineering projects. She has a combined Master of Science and Business Administration degree in Business Development and Consulting. Peter is a Senior Transportation Project Manager and Senior Associate with Stantec Consulting. He is responsible for the delivery of municipal road and transit infrastructure projects to both public and private sector clients. With over 30 years in the public service and 12 years in the consulting sector, Peter has extensive municipal experience and understands project impacts. Diana Adley is a senior environmental planner with 20 years of environmental consulting experience, participating in a broad range of multidisciplinary studies. She is responsible for coordinating and managing Class CAs, master plans, and detailed design assignments. Diana specializes in municipal Class CA process and is a skilled environmental team lead on projects of varying complexity. Welcome, Hilda, Peter, and Diana.
Thank you, Salim. Thank you very much. So Diana is going to share her screen. Oh, it's already sharing. Okay, copy that. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our presentation today on the Bass Pro Mills Extension Municipal Class CA Schedule C, Highway 400 to Weston Road project within the city of Vaughan. This presentation is a Municipal Class CA showcase, and we're excited to bring this to you as the first presentation of the 2021 MEA conference. So our agenda today includes a study team introduction. Salim's done a pretty good job of that already. So we'll give an overview of the study, some study considerations and challenges, issues management, our consultation approach, and some key takeaways. And of course, we'll answer any questions at the end of the presentation. So introduction, Salim's already done. I'm Hilda Estedebe, Transportation Project Manager at the City of Vaughan, Transportation Planning and Engineering. I'm also the project manager for the Bass Pro Mills Environmental Assessment Project. And I'll pass it on to Peter Holava.
Yes, thank you, Hilda. It's Peter, and I'm a senior associate with Stantec, and we deliver in the transportation business line. We deliver municipal infrastructure projects to municipal clients, including public transit. My role is to manage EA studies and detailed design of capital infrastructure projects. I've been with Stantec 3 years. In the last 12 years, I've been in the consulting service. And as Salim noted, prior to this, I was in the public service for over 30 years. First then with the Municipality of Metropolitan Toronto Roads and Traffic Department, and then with the Region of York. Therefore, as a former MEA member, I'm very delighted to be back at a workshop and talk about the City of Vaughan Bass Pro Mills EA study. Although the agenda left questions to the end, I do have one burning question now for anybody who may know. Do I still hold the bridge building contest record that was set at the 2009 workshop in Kingston, which, as I recall, was 235 pounds?
I'm sure we can find out later on the presentation.
Salim's on mute.
Oh.
We'll have to look at the records, Peter. We'll get back to you on that.
Oh, I'm sure Mike Walrup has them somewhere.
Diana.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Diana Adley. I'm a senior environmental planner with Stantec's transportation group and the environmental team lead for this project.
Awesome. So just an overview of the study. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking at the extension of Bass Pro Mills from Highway 400, where it currently terminates, to Weston Road. And this was identified as a key recommendation in the 2014 Vaughan Mills Centre Secondary Plan document. It was identified to help to improve transportation in the area, to provide additional AT connectivity, to provide additional transit network connectivity, and also to support the future development plans in the area, which is on the west side of Highway 400. And the implementation schedule for this project would be 2031. So we're looking at a 10-year planning horizon. So considerations included the City of Vaughan's Transportation Master Plan, and definitely the York Region Transportation Master Plan, as there are some significant York Regional roads in the area, including Weston Road on the west. We have Rutherford Road to the north. We have Jane Street to the east, and then Langstaff to the south. There's the ongoing Langstaff Road Environmental Assessment, which includes the widening of Langstaff Road. And initially it had the interchange, full moves interchange at Highway 400, but that has since been postponed till further notice. But if that were to go forward, it would have potentially had an impact to our study as well. So we had to keep our eyes on these ongoing studies. And more imminently, there's the Western Road Detailed Design Project. So the region is currently conducting detailed design on the widening of Western Road from 4 to 6 lanes. And of course, we had to coordinate where our road extension would intersect with Western Road to also work with that detailed design project that is ongoing. And as you can see, Bassville Mills terminates as a structural crossing over Highway 400 and connects to an on-ramp to Highway 400 southbound. So we definitely had to keep the MTO in the loop. We engaged them actually at the RFP stage, and we're still meeting with them on an ongoing basis because we are within their controlled access highway corridor. And therefore, we are working with them to ensure that their standards are being met, and also that we are able to find a balance between our intent for Bassville Mills and the cross-section that we plan to have through this area, and any impacts that it could have to the controlled access highway connections on the east side of Highway 400. We also have a very, very active ratepayers association on the west side of Western Road. There's some residents there. They're very active with a lot of what the city of Vaughan and York region does in their neighborhood, very vocal group. We meet with them on a regular basis to hear their concerns and try to address them as best as we can within our study. Their key concern was traffic infiltration. But we were able to review as part of our traffic analysis, and we can show that this connection of Bassville Mills to Western Road would actually help to improve traffic operations in the area, provide an alternate route for traffic, and to help to mitigate some of the operations at key intersections, and therefore will actually help with the traffic infiltration concerns that the Ratepayers Association has. In addition, another consideration we had was the land use designation. So as part of the secondary plan, that portion of land is designated as commercial for the future, and that's part of the city's vision. So on to the next slide, you can see the Vaughan Mills Center secondary plan is bound by the red, and with the orange line at the bottom, which is the Bassville Mills. So the Bassville Mills is the southmost portion. So the city's vision is to incorporate the road network that you see there in blue on the west side of the highway, and to have commercial land use in this area. 2 of those roads would continue down south to expand the network. And as you can see on the east side, we have the Vaughan Mills Mall, which is already a very significant attraction for the city today. And so there's a vision to expand this area, to make it more aesthetically appealing, to increase its walkability, to have more green space, and to add to some of the existing developments that are there along Western Road, and of course, as part of the Vaughan Mills area. We were pleased to work together with our urban design peers at the city, because the Vaughan Mills Center Urban Design Study was going on simultaneously with the Bassville Mills Environmental Assessment. So we were able to inform, it was a partnership almost, to inform what the Bassville Mills cross-section would look like so that it fit into the overall vision for the streetscape and the urban design for this secondary plan area. And for anyone who's interested, the streetscape plan was just recently approved. It's on their website. It's a very beautiful plan that's being made for this area. Like I said, green space, walkability, accented by statues and things like that. It's a very, very beautiful plan that it's been put in place for the secondary plan area. As part of that is also the realignment of Black Creek. So if we can go on to the next slide, you can see this is the secondary plan in more detail. The existing Black Creek kind of, you can see where the cursor goes, sort of crosses at that location. There are plans as part of the secondary plan to realign Black Creek and create a green buffer zone, open public space, some sort of park, something that's very aesthetically appealing, and another key attraction for the city through this part of the secondary plan area. And of course, for us, for the EA, our concern was where this crossing would be as it relates to the future Bassville Mills. So some of the challenges that we encountered, this is a very interesting EA to work on. One of our key challenges was that land use. So as I mentioned earlier, the city, has a vision for commercial land use on the west side of Highway 400. However, the landowners, where the Bass Pro Mills would go, the developers would prefer to have a residential land use. And as a result of that, the secondary plan has been under appeals for a few years. So they're going through the Ontario Land Tribunal process, or which is formerly the Ontario Municipal Board process, to appeal the city's decision or designation to keep that area west of Highway 400 as commercial. They would prefer to have residential, which I'm assuming would be condos and townhouses and so on. So those appeals are still ongoing, and without really knowing which side the outcome of the appeals would go. We stuck with the conservative approach and we use the commercial land use in terms of our planning and our traffic analysis. But we'll discuss that in a bit more detail as we advance with the presentation. So Diana will take it from here.
Thank you, Hilda. Moving on, so although the area was surrounded by established residential and commercial development and also bounded by Highway 400 to the east, the study area does contain some existing natural features, including Black Creek, which supports fish and fish habitat, a drainage channel, and wetlands. Also, the scope of this study included a number of site investigations, such as geotechnical, hydrogeological, natural heritage, cultural, archaeological, and contamination review. However, property owners were not supportive of the preliminary development decisions within the area and did not grant permission to enter for any of the private lands within the study area. Also, not uncommon to anyone going through the project planning and design process, the COVID-19 pandemic added another layer of complexity to this project. The consultation plan was confirmed in winter 2020 and included a number of in-person public consultation events and stakeholder meetings. But this required us to revisit the consultation plan and developed alternative ways to effectively engage the community. And Hilda?
Yes, so some of our issues management included continuous communication with regarding the ongoing appeals process. We had staff within our city, the City of Vaughan's policy planning department that worked closely on that OLT process and kept us informed as best as they could with any potential outcomes that could in fact influence our EA study, whether on the direction of the appeals of the land use. There were appeals regarding the intersection locations and the Black Creek locations. So there was quite a bit of things that were in the air that we had to keep our ears to the ground as we move forward with our EA, and we'll discuss how we mitigated that as we advance with the presentation. We also established a stakeholders group, which is made up of Western Downs Ratepayers Association. We're part of that, the Ratepayers Association. Other residents, key stakeholders, developers were part of that, and we met with them on a regular basis to help us provide feedback into our EA study as well. And regarding the PTEs, just as Diana mentioned, we had difficulty obtaining those. We're kind of sandwiched between the appeals process, unfortunately, but we did our best. We reached out with letters. We had phone calls, meetings. We also sent our emails through our legal department. We did as best as we could to obtain those PTEs. And we also had direct engagement with York Region and individual property owners as the study progressed. York Region, especially as relates to Western Road, as I mentioned earlier, and then individual property owners as relates to any of their key concerns that they had with the study. And Diana?
Thank you, Hilda. Yes, and also the Conservation Authority participated in the city's RFP process. We also had them involved in the natural environment impact study review process for the terms of reference for the project. They participated in the technical advisory committee and were involved in how we were going to approach the existing Black Creek and headwater drainage features. With respect to consultation, a number of strategies were used to help to ensure notification of the study reached a broad demographic. As a first step, the city had a dedicated webpage on their existing website. And this is where we posted all of the public notifications, response summaries, and the online consultation events. Notifications were not only advertised on the webpage and in local newspapers, but also through the city's internal news releases, public service announcements, and these are distributed to any residents or others that select to be notified of any community announcements. And the existing city has an existing social media platform or multiple platforms that were used to advertise notices, and reminders were pushed or posted on social media during PIC review periods. Also, those on the study mailing list received notifications by direct mail out or by email, and the Canada Post mail drop system was also used to deliver hard copies of the notice in flyer format to all properties within 200-meter radius of the study area. As Hilda mentioned, we also established a stakeholder group at the onset of the study. And with respect to public information centers, the pandemic forced everyone to review alternative ways to communicate effectively, and many different platforms have been used to host online events. But for this project, we use Articulate Storyline, which is an engagement platform that shares information through a recorded presentation and guides users through display slides that would be typically be shared in in-person events, but it allowed participants to select live links to additional information such as background events, background reports and detailed evaluations. So I'll try to share the online presentation. Hopefully you can see and hear this, and I'll just play a brief piece of it.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for this online public information center for the Bass Pro Mills extension from Highway 400.
So as you can see, there's a transcript that details what is being said through the presentation. There is a resources tab that you can post resources, documents, relevant information, a menu that allows users to navigate through. And also there's tabs that they can also go back and forth, pause, and adjust the volumes. Our telephone numbers were also offered on study notifications and public displays so that we could be contacted at any time to discuss the project one-on-one with the public. And a technical advisory committee was also established at the initiation of the project, which included representatives from city staff departments, MTO, the region, and the Conservation Authority. These meetings, of course, were held virtually and were key to identifying technical concerns or specific requirements, provided opportunities to ask questions, address concerns in a timely fashion. All communications were all going throughout the study by having informal discussions and email correspondence as needed. The pandemic also required the closure of all administrative or band offices within First Nation communities, so it was really important to ensure that all communications were followed up on. As a first step, we prepared and distributed a notice of request to consult at the time of study commencement, which offers more detail about the project, including location, the studies that will be undertaken, and an approximate timeline. This was mailed and emailed to all potentially interested communities. And then we followed up with telephone calls and emails to make sure that notifications were received and to discuss any initial questions or concerns or follow-up commitments during detailed design, such as participating in archaeological assessment activities. And I'll pass this on to Peter. Thank you.
Okay, here you see the preferred plan and profile that emerged after we considered and evaluated other design options. Over at the west end, the Bass Pro intersection connection depicted at Weston Road interfaces with the recommended improvements from the Weston Road regions, from the regions for the 2014 Western Vaughan IEA study, which included Weston Road. The ultimate configuration of this intersection will be a full movement signalized T intersection. Over to the east and about 800 meters from Weston Road is the Highway 400 with the existing 4-lane bridge that only provides access to the southbound 400 from Bass Pro. As Hilda mentioned, because it is in the controlled access limit, to satisfy MTO and tax standard requirements, a 5-meter bridge widening is planned on the south side of the structure by introducing a new girder line. Just beyond and to the east of the highway is the limit of the project where we tie into the present Bass Pro Mills at Fisherman's Way and the Highway 400 northbound off-ramp. In between Weston Road and Fisherman's Way, a 4-lane urban road is planned with active transportation within both boulevards, along with a bioretention feature within each boulevard to promote water quantity and quality. The project cost estimate is about in the range of $20 million and includes property acquisition. The future north-south streets that you see there are from the present status of the 2014 Vaughan Mills Secondary Plan, and their locations are subject to landowners' appeal and site plan application review. Concrete box culvert is needed for the Black Creek, and the plan shows it located at the present location, which potentially is an interim location.
And here, this graphic here just shows the different alternatives for where the ultimate Black Creek could go. So as I mentioned earlier, there are a couple of different options. The one to the right, furthest right, is actually where the developers would like the Black Creek to be, more central to the block, with 2 connecting intersections on each side as opposed to 3. We have to the very furthest left is the Black Creek location as per the secondary plan, which I showed earlier on in the presentation. And the one to the middle is a slight adjustment to the secondary plan location, just to provide additional separation between the Weston Road and the first intersection that we plan to have within this block here. So we had to ensure that all 3 were feasible as part of our EA, but we'll discuss that a bit more later on in the presentation.
Okay, here you see the preferred typical section, which emerged again after considering evaluating other typical section options. Planning for the extension of the Bass Pro Mills was centered around a 30-meter municipal right-of-way. As you can see, it has the active transportation facilities in both boulevards, along with the bioretention features in each boulevard as well. Grading is extended beyond the right-of-way limit, since adjacent area development will likely need to match grade at property line, and therefore place fill material under PTE will favor future development plans and avoid need for additional property acquisition or retaining walls.
And this is just a 3D rendering, courtesy of the Vaughan Mills Center Secondary Plan, Streetscape Plan, and Urban Design. As I mentioned earlier, we were working closely with our urban design team. So as you can see here, this is, we've got the active transportation in the boulevard. We have the swales, which we're happy to incorporate, and the 4 lanes in the middle. The images to the right just give an idea of what these swales or low impact design features would look like, and they'd be placed intermittently along Bass Pro Mills.
Sorry, everyone. Some of the key takeaways we learned through this study are listed on this slide. Likely not unique to this project and probably experienced by many of you is the level of public participation using an online setting that has risen significantly. We quickly realized that online consultation is highly effective and certainly has increased participation in these types of events. Where the city of Vaughan may have had roughly 20 to 60 people attend in-person PICs, depending on the level of interest, a total of 2,141 views of the online PIC1 was recorded for this project, 471 of which were unique visitors. And also, while the city might typically receive 10 to 20 comment forms at a traditional in-person event, there were 101 survey responses received during the online PIC period for this project. Also, the online approach to public consultation has proven to reach a broader demographic, and while productivity and efficiencies have improved with respect to hosting events online, as opposed to attending in person, the increased level of participation also requires us to consider it's additional study time to review and consider, address, or respond to the incoming comments and questions from the public. And as noted, site access prevented us from undertaking a number of field investigation. However, it was possible for us to progress the study by amending the scope of work, and in some cases by carrying out desktop reviews and deferring detailed design to investigations, or detailed investigations, sorry, until detailed design, or by completing some field reviews only from publicly accessible right-of-ways, to ensure that the amended scope of work would suffice, specifically with respect to the natural environment. we had the Conservation Authority review and approve the reduced work program. And further, the unknown outcome of the land use appeals process presented different land use and transportation scenarios that Hilda mentioned that could occur in the future. However, a conservative assumption was used for the traffic analysis, and we were able to assess the feasibility of alternative creek crossing locations and alignments to confirm that the recommended culvert crossing will work at any of the locations under consideration. And sorry. And if there are any questions, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Hilda, Diana, and Peter for the presentation. Dan, are there any questions from the floor?
Hello, Salim. I'm just waiting to see if there's any questions to be submitted. There may be a delay here. So just give me a second.
Sure. I have a question. I'll start with a question for Hilda. Hilda, considering that you've seen some success with the online PICs, is the city looking at, your options going forward in terms of, just doing online PCCs instead of, the in-person PICs?
And that is a very good question, Salim. The jury's still out on that because we still do have people who prefer the in-person contact. However, we are starting to standardize our online consultation across the city. There's been training across the various departments on how that would look like and which platform that we'd be using. And at this point, we're thinking a hybrid approach in the future for now. Given, of course, that while maintaining any health and safety guidelines as necessary. But we have heard from some members of the public who do want to see some of that in-person consultation return. But yes, definitely the city's moving, definitely moving more towards a virtual format, because we have seen, as Diana mentioned, that success in that broader demographic, a lot of the youth that were missing before during the PICs. A lot of that younger generation, they're coming online. So we still want to keep them engaged. So a hybrid model for now, and then we'll see how things go. I think that's the general position of the city at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Salim.
Any, Dan, questions?
We do. Enjoyed your presentation, Hilda, Peter, and Diana. We do have a question from Mohan Tour from the City of Oshawa. During the review process, has the city's operations staff provided input with respect to future maintenance issues, for example, bioswales, et cetera?
Absolutely. And that was part of the benefit that we had from having our urban design team working with us with that urban realm study going on simultaneously. We had a few meetings definitely with our operations maintenance team, because before we arrived at this option, there were a number of other different options we were reviewing, as you know, as part of the EA process. That's typical. And operations and maintenance they were very much involved in that. And we made sure that the city was able to and have the machinery and the wherewithal to maintain this low impact design features, the swale features that we're planning to incorporate in. And that was a big component of our evaluation process. Very good question. Thank you.
Mohan has a follow-up question. While a 30-meter right-of-way is being proposed, has there been consideration given for the grading concerns beyond the right-of-way that may impact properties at the detailed design stage?
Absolutely. We've reviewed grading and we're still moving forward with preliminary design. We're going to 30%. In areas that we know there would be property impacts, especially to the south, we're including retaining wall structures to help to reduce those property impacts. And again, we have met with each of these property owners individually. They're aware of what we're planning to do. There's no surprises. We've engaged real estate. So very good question. We're definitely on that, knowing, as we mentioned during the presentation, that these property impacts are a tricky subject, especially as it relates to the appeals that are ongoing in the land use. So landowners are very much aware of what the potential property impacts could be, and we're doing our best to limit them where possible with retaining wall structures. And Peter, if you want to add to that, please feel free to do so. But I think that's a response.
Sure. Just quickly there, the given the elevation differences between Weston Road and the Highway 400 bridge structure and the 800 meters in between, obviously we had to climb to the elevation of the bridge itself. And recognizing that future area development would like to minimize the raising of the grade and importing fill, we still had to raise the profile of the original ground. And then recognizing that the future signalized intersection where the southbound off-ramp is would be signalized, we didn't want to introduce it on a 5% grade or anything of that. So I think we kept that about 3 or 3.5.
Okay, thanks for that. Just in order for us to stay on schedule, that'll be it for questions for this presentation. Celine, back to you.
Thank you.
And I think, Dan, if there are other questions from the floor, people can channel them, or then we can arrange to get a response to the people.
We'll certainly do that. There's a couple of questions here that we'll pass on to the team separately.
Okay, perfect. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, Diana, Hilda, and Peter, you will be receiving a digital gift certificate as our token of appreciation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Celine.
Okay.
See you, Celine. Bye.
We'll now move on to our next presentation. That is on excess soil management in Ontario. And our speaker today is Karan Jandu. So Karan Jandu is a senior policy analyst in the land use policy section of the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. During his time at the ministry, Karan has worked on multiple pieces of legislation, regulation, and policy, including pesticides, greenhouse nutrient feed water regulation, the new on-site and access soil management regulation, and is currently the program lead for the development of the new access soil registry. Karan also has the experience in policy program areas such as environmental assessments, aggregates, nutrient management, stormwater management, financial assurance, and is an experienced engagement advisor and a relationship builder. Welcome, Karan Jandu.
Salim, we'll have the presenter on in a second. Bear with us.
Hello, Karan. Welcome.
Good morning, Salim. I assume you were introducing me and I got kicked out right at that exact moment.
Okay, so your introduction's done. I think everybody knows. Let's start with the presentation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you again. Salim or someone else, can you just give me a thumbs up? You can see my presentation.
Yep, we have it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you again. My name is Karan Jandu. I'm the Senior Policy Analyst at Land Use Policy at the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. We really want to thank Salim Alibai and MEA for inviting us out. I feel that the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks shares a personal relationship with not only QPs across the province, but the Municipal Engineers Association, particularly with all the work that we've done in the many years in the past related to, QP work with the Record of Site Condition Registry, work related to environmental assessments and municipal assessments and whatnot. So I really want to thank MEA again for inviting us out, and I will focus my presentation today on the excess soil registry and the excess soil regulation itself, certain components that are already in effect and certain ones that are coming into effect. Perfect. Before I begin my presentation, I just would like to do a land acknowledgement. I'm currently located in the city of Toronto. I would like to acknowledge that the land that I'm presenting on is from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And it is now home to many diverse peoples of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. We also acknowledge that Treaty 13 is covered in Toronto by the Mississaugas of the Credit. And I would also like to acknowledge all the different people from the Municipal Engineers Association and others alike on this call from across the province, maybe on other traditional First Nations and Métis lands. Just a friendly reminder, this presentation is intended as a brief summary of the excess soil regulation and the excess soil registry. This presentation is for information purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. And finally, I am human, and in the event that there are any inconsistencies between the regulation and my presentation, the regulation will always take precedence, and please do call me out on my mistakes. I'm just going to shift my focus here as I'm looking at the presentation on my side, and please do follow along. Today's presentation will focus on just an overview, as I said, of the regulation itself and the registry, and I assume we will do a Q&A after this fact. And I will also share the details of myself and others in the ministry to help the MEA and MEA members navigate through the regulatory interpretation of the registry. So just, we want to just start off as an overview. The regulation the formal name is the On-Site and Excess Soil Management Regulation, OREG 40619. It is created and developed under the Environmental Protection Act. So as we begin, what is excess soil? Excess soil is soil that is excavated at a project area that cannot be reused on site. The whole notion of it being excess, it is being moved off-site, and it could include soils from construction and maintenance activities such as buildings, infrastructure, stormwater sediment, and whatnot. Excess soil can be taken to a suitable site for reuse, or it can be sent for processing or disposal at a landfill or other waste disposal facilities. These facilities have ECAs. And finally, reuse of excess soil on-site or locally is encouraged over disposal or hauling of soils on long distances to reduce project costs, greenhouse gas emissions, and unnecessary use of landfill capacity and impacts related to noise, dust, safety, and road wear and tear. So what does the excess soil regulation do? This regulation tries very hard to clear the rules for beneficial reuse of excess soil, designates when excess soil is a waste and provides a criteria if satisfied, removes that designation, specifies when waste approvals are needed and when exemptions are provided, sets a minimum requirements for certain generators of excess soil to ensure information such as characterization is available to facilitate, and the key is facilitate appropriate reuse of excess soil, and to track certain soil movements to provide greater transparency. In addition, the regulation also provides soil standards which help build a confidence to beneficially reuse soil in a manner that is safe for the human health and the environment. And finally, clarifies the ministry's provincial role and how it can be integrated with municipal bylaws or other instruments. So commonly used terminology in non-application, I won't go through it all, but once again, excess soil is soil that could be crushed rock or mixed with rock or crushed rock that is being moved off the project area. There's a whole bunch of other definitions there that I won't specifically go into that hopefully everyone knows. If not, you guys can always go back and take a look into that as well. Just a quick reminder of anytime I say a class 1 soil management site, it's a site with an ECA. A class 2 soil management site is a temporary site that does not have an ECA. Now, when does the excess soil regulation not apply? It doesn't apply to hazardous waste as defined under OREC 347 of the EPA. It does not apply to aggregate operations such as pits and quarries that are excavating aggregate resources, including recycled aggregates and topsoil within the meaning of the Aggregate Resources Act. It does not affect peat or the production of peat from a peat extraction operation, and it does not affect surface or water body, the final placement of excess soil on the bed of a surface water body. So I'm going to do a quick recap of the rules that are already in place in relation to the soil itself, in relation to the regulation itself. On January 1st of 2021, earlier this year, the excess soil reuse rules came in, and it said excess soil may be reused, and it is not considered a waste if all of the following: it is being beneficially reused and not stockpiling. Stockpiling is not a beneficial reuse. The soil is dry and the quality and quantity of the soil align with the necessary beneficial reuse. And if the soil is not dry, an instrument must permit that deposit of the liquid soil. The reuse site has consented in writing to take the soil, i.e. it is not illegally dumped. And generally soil staying in the project area is not a waste. So once again, soil can be moved from a project area to reuse site as long as they meet the applicable soil standard at that reuse site. There's a beneficial reuse at that reuse site. And once again, if any soil that is staying on the project area, it is not considered a waste. In January 21st, 2021, we also introduced the excess soil reuse rules that are based on quality and quantity. These rules are detailed in the rules for soil management and excess soil quality standards. This is a document adopted by reference to the regulation, and it is meant to be read in conjunction to the regulations. So in many components of the regulation, you will see, please see this document. And you as a practitioner or as a QP should be going to that document and looking at the information there. This document includes generic risk-based soil standards. These are standards that were developed based on the 153 standards, and they're either based on small volume up to 350 cubic meters, once again, same as the Brownfields 153 standards, or volume independent standards that were developed specifically for excess soil. All these standards are based on land use categories, once again, similar to 153, and there's generic leachate screening tables and ceiling values are also provided. Once again, as a QP, you also have the opportunity to develop site-specific standards. And these standards could be developed through a new beneficial reuse assessment tool, what we call the BRAT, or a risk assessment, which a lot of you may already be familiar with. And finally, earlier this year, we had new rules related to specific rules related to cropland sensitive sites and near water bodies and specific types of soil, such as soil with salt mixed with compost and whatnot. This is just a quick overview of a table of what you will see in the soil rules document. As one you can see on these are the 9 different types of tables that we have for excess soil. The small volume ones are the same as 153, and the volume independent ones are specific to excess soil. As you'll see, the full depth background table 1 is exactly the same in both excess soil for volume independent and 350, under 350. In addition, earlier this year, January 1st, 2021, there was an exemption from low risk activities from waste approvals. These activities including hauling of excess soil, liquid or dry. So, rule generally related to the containment and safety of during transportation for haulers to provide this information that about what they're transporting. So if this is akin to a hauling record or a hauling information. If a truck is pulled over that is carrying excess soil, the truck driver needs to know where they're going, where they're coming from, how much soil they have, and how much soil they have in the truck. We also exempted low-risk activities for on-site processing. This includes passive dewatering, mixing of some soils, mixing of soil and debris, and mixing of additives or solidification for the purposes of transportation. Once again, these sort of low-risk activities are no longer require an ECA. Finally, we also allowed the development and the establishment of Class 2 soil management facilities that can store up to 10,000 cubic meters of excess soil. And the similar sort of low-risk processing is permitted on these Class 2 facilities as well. In addition, this excess soil regulation also allows local waste transfer facilities to be set up. They're similar to Class 2 facilities. They're known as field operations under 347. And in the soil rules document, we have general storage rules that apply to all different sites, such as setbacks from water bodies, stockpile sizing, noise, dust, and other adverse effects that should be concerned about. So this is the part I guess you guys are all here for. What are the rules coming into effect on January 1st, 2022? We are less than a month and a half away. New source site or project area planning rules. Project leaders of some sites generating excess soil will be subject to certain planning requirements to help ensure that the soil is managed and reused properly, and some activities will require QP oversight. These requirements include filing a notice to the public registry before removing any soil from the project area. I will go through more of the public registry or the excess soil registry later in the slide deck. As part of the excess soil planning requirements, a qualified person may be used to complete an assessment of past uses, which is similar to a phase 1. If necessary, based on the results of the assessment of past uses, a sampling and analysis plan, and a soil characterization report. All these documents and how to prepare them are all listed in the soil rules document that is adopted by reference. In addition, an excess soil destination assessment report to verify the intended reuse sites that can accept the soil based on the characterization and sampling that was done. Finally, develop and apply a tracking system to track each load of excess soil during the transportation. And to support compliance transparency, key information from the reports above will be included in the excess soil registry, which once again, I'll go through later on in this presentation. Also coming into effect on January 1st of 2022 is a new requirements for large reuse sites. Reuse sites that are accepting 10,000 cubic meters or greater for undertaking will be required to register to the excess soil registry and develop and implement procedures to track and inspect each load of excess soil that is being received. There is an exemption related to infrastructure projects. So let's sort of go through the registry requirements. In a way, they are all tied with the planning requirements. As of January 1st, 2022, the regulation requires a notice to be filed to the registry by project leaders for certain types of projects. I will go through the types of projects later on. The owners and operators of reuse sites and the owners of operators of residential development soil depots. These are the 3 types of notices that will be required to be filed after January 1st, 2022. So let's start off with a project area notice to the registry. Some project leaders at a project area prescribed by the regulation will need to file a notice to the registry. The requirement to file a notice to the registry is laid out in Section 8 of the regulation. So the connection that I'd like to make about planning requirements earlier on is, if you are required to file a notice to the excess soil registry under Section 8, you are also required to complete an assessment of past uses, if necessary, a sampling analysis plan, soil characterization report, and an excess soil destination report, and a tracking system. So once again, if the regulation requires you to file a notice under the registry, then you must complete the planning that is associated to excess soil planning itself. Now, who needs to file a notice to the registry? i.e. who needs to plan for excess soil. Generally, sites that are generating greater than 2,000 cubic meters of excess soil that are in a settlement area. Once again, the quantitative threshold for planning and filing a notice to the registry from our project area is generating greater than 2,000 cubic meters of excess soil in a settlement area. Now, if you are below 2,000 cubic meters, then there may be a qualitative threshold where if any part of your site is within an APEC, an Enhanced Investigation Project Area. So if you are, say, generating 800 cubic meters of excess soil from a gas station, you will still be required to file a notice to the registry, and you will still be required to do excess soil planning, which is, once again, the destination assessment report, characterization, sampling analysis plan, and tracking system. And finally, the third threshold in order to file a notice is where the primary purpose is remediating contaminated lands. That is, if a new property use cannot proceed without the completion of soil remediation, and such as soil removal. So if you're filing a RSC and you are removing excess soil that is contaminated from that project area, you will need to file a notice to the registry as well. All the components that are required as part of a registry are listed in Schedule 1 of the regulation. That includes the name of the project leader, the address, the quantity, the quality, where the soil is going, and whatnot. All that can be found in Schedule 1. Exemptions and project area soil going to a landfill. So there are exemptions to project areas from filing a notice to the registry. It includes several exemptions, also from the planning requirements. Generally, most of these exemptions are laid out in Schedule 2, and I would encourage anyone, if you're not sure if Section 8 regulation applies to you, please go to Schedule 2, and you can see a list of exemptions. Now, do you need to file a notice for excess soil going to a landfill? Yes, you do. If all of the excess soil from a project area is being disposed to a landfill and not going to a reuse site, there are still general requirements to filing out a notice to the excess soil registry. However, the exemption under Schedule 2, which I focus on, is, for example, if it's less than 100 cubic meters of excess soil. So, you and your contractor are building a pool, you excavate 85 cubic meters of excess soil, and your contractor recommends it should all go to the landfill, just to reduce undue burden for smaller quantities of excess soil. We will not require a notice to be filed. Reuse site notice to the excess soil registry. A reuse site can accept excess soil for a beneficial reuse in an undertaking. This includes backfill, raising the grade of the land for a planned development or an infrastructure project, or rehabilitation. Some reuse sites that are accepting large amounts of excess soil are required to file a notice. So what is the threshold to filing a notice to the registry for a reuse site? That is listed in Section 19 of the regulation, and that threshold is 10,000 cubic meters of excess soil. So any reuse site in the province that is accepting 10,000 cubic meters of excess soil or greater after January 1st, 2022 will have to file a notice to the registry. The information related to what the notice requires is all listed out in Section 19. Let's talk about exemptions now. There are exemptions related to filing a notice for a reuse site. And once again, that exemption is undertaking related to an infrastructure project. If you are in a reuse site that is accepting greater than 10,000 cubic meters, but is for the purposes of an infrastructure project, you do not need to file a notice to the registry. Another caveat I'd like to bring up is if you already have a reuse site in operation, and say it has accepted 10,000 cubic meters last year, but after January 1st, 2022, it will only accept 8,000. You do not need to file a notice. The notice threshold is based on 10,000 cubic meters or greater of excess soil being accepted after January 1st, 2022. The last type of notice that is required on the excess soil registry is for a residential developmental soil depot. These depots are temporary soil storage sites. They may be at a residential, subdevelopment, and they manage XSOL that meets the residential reuse quality standards. From this depot, it is temporary in nature. The soil will eventually be redistributed to other reuse sites or residential properties or other less property land use. The amount of excess soil at any depot cannot exceed 10,000 cubic meters, and Section 7 sub 4 of the regulation requires a notice to be filled out. The content of this notice is once again listed in Section 7 sub 4 of the regulation. We don't have a slide on exemptions related to a depot. Once again, if your depot could have 5,000 cubic meters, you still need to file a notice. However, in the context, if your depot has greater than 10,000 cubic meters of excess soil, it is not considered a residential soil depot underneath the regulation, and you may need approvals from the ministry or municipality. This is of great importance for MEA members now. Who is responsible for filing out a notice? I know a lot of times the municipal engineer may be doing some sort of cursory work, but a lot of the work is being carried out by contractors or a project manager that the municipality may have hired. So in this table that we have developed, the municipality in all contexts is the project leader. If they have a reuse site, they are the owner operator. If they have a residential development soil depot, they are the owner or operator. There's responsibility always lies with the project leader. However, underneath the regulation and underneath the registry, they can have other individuals known as authorized persons fill out the registry on their behalf. The only thing the authorized person cannot do is sign the declaration, which must be signed by the project leader in the project area notice or owner or operator for the reuse site and depot notices. However, that authorized person may facilitate the signing. So an example, your QP or the municipality's QP or consulting engineer or consulting contractor files out the registry. They will send the municipality, the project leader, the declaration, and the municipality or the project leader at the municipality will need to sign it. But all other contexts of the registry can be facilitated by an authorized person.
Karan,
So
just a time check, you're 3 minutes to.
I'm almost done. Almost
okay.
done. I just wanted to make a sort of a connection with the XSOL registry and RIPRA. RIPRA is the Resource for Productivity Resource Recovery Authority. It is the organization that the ministry has retained to develop the regulation. There's a link there. You can see the minister's direction letter asking RIPRA to develop this. What is RIPRA's role in all of this? They operate the registry. They enable the ministry to access notice. They enable the public to access notice. They are the ones who collect the fees, and they support the stakeholders when they are filing a notice to the registry itself. All compliance-related activities and regulatory interpretation lies with the ministry. You know what? There's a slide on voluntary notice filings. I won't go into, but I will just reiterate that public access of the registry. So anyone from the public can see the notice filing, and as a component of transparency and all the components of the notice itself. This is something that I just want to quickly highlight: registry launch and training. So the registry is launching on December 1st of this year. RIPRA is undertaking some webinars for training. The webinars are listed there on November 25th, November 30th, and December 2nd. I do recommend and encourage everyone to go to the RIPRA website and register so you can understand and learn how to use the registry itself. And the last thing I'd like to focus on is that the ministry is undertaking some XSOL webinars themselves. We've done 6 so far. The next one is on Wednesday for QPs. If any QP would like to register, they can with the ministry and learn, have a more in-depth version of the same regulation that I've just sort of presented on. And finally, I just want to focus on some additional resources that are available to all of you. There's a list for that. And finally, these are just our contacts.
Okay, thank you very much, Karan.
Thank you for getting me on the speed track right at the end, Salim. I appreciate it.
I know that this is a hot topic for our members and the municipalities they represent. I'm sure there are many questions. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to assemble the questions, and I know that I have a meeting coming up with the ministry through the MEA's liaison committee.
Yes,
And
yes, you do.
surely, if there are any questions that we need to bring up to the ministry, we'll do that through that avenue.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Karan, for the presentation. And, as a token of our appreciation, we'll be sending you a digital gift certificate. So
Thank you.
Thank you so
Once
much
again, thank you, Salim. Thank you, MEA. And I really would like to encourage everyone to register for the QP webinar that is in 2 days for everyone. And you guys can always send me an email, and I will send out an invite to you.
So Karan, I'll just speak briefly. Your webinars are oversubscribed. We can't get into them. Is there a chance the ministry can consider recording the webinars and making them available so that people can go at their own leisure and look at them and listen to them?
Sure. We are exploring that opportunity. We're actually recording each webinar. They are being recorded. We just don't have the ability to share them. However, if all the decks that have been presented on the slide that's up right now, the first 6, if you would like the presentation itself, anyone can have those presentations. So essentially, after each webinar, we share the presentation with anyone that was on the webinar or was on the wait list.
Okay.
Thank you again.
All right. Thank you so much. Karan.
Salim, can I just clarify one thing with regards to questions to the delegates out there? Could you please put your name, associate your name with the question so we can get back to you with an answer? That would be the easiest way for us to deal with these questions after the fact. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Karan.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the time, 10:17. I'm going to suggest a 5-minute bio break before the next presentation. So if it's 10:17, if we can all be back by 10:22, try to stay on time. Okay, we'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you, everybody. Okay, 10:22, we'll start with the next presentation. Hope everybody's back. All right, the next presentation is minimizing excess soil with the use of rigid pipes. Our presenter is Enrico Stradioro. Enrico is a professional engineer in Ontario with over 25 years of experience in the concrete pipe and precast industry. Before joining the Ontario Concrete Pipe Association in 2009, now CCPPA, he was employed with precast manufacturer in Ontario, supporting areas in the company with engineering, sales, and technical marketing of proprietary products. Enrico participates in several committees of industry groups. Enrico graduated from the University of Waterloo in 1995 with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. Welcome, Enrico.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Salim, and I'll just get my presentation started here. And how's that looking?
That's good, Enrico.
Okay, perfect, great. Well, good morning, everyone, and glad to be here. And that was a great presentation and lead-in by Karan with excess soils. I'm certainly glad that he was able to deliver the nuts and bolts of the new regulation. We expect our approach will be a little bit softer, but certainly with new infrastructure builds, the talk of the town is certainly the new regulation and dealing with excess soils. Today, I'd like to share a perspective from our industry on the opportunity to reduce excess soils. We'll be looking at the practical requirements of concrete pipe installation, specifically modifications to soil material specifications that will be used for installing concrete pipe and that can result in reducing excess soils. So this is my analogy. Taking a bite, they'll say an apple a day will help keep the doctor away. And that's a good thing. From my perspective, using concrete pipe can help take a bite out of excess soils, and that's a good thing too. Before we go on, I just wanted to make a quick connection between these industry organizations for the listeners today. Many of you would know, being in Ontario, that the Ontario Concrete Pipe Association represents the Ontario producers who employ local families and use local resources to produce Ontario-made products. We're a not-for-profit association and we've been around since 1957. In 2013, the OCPA board wanted to create a national organization, once again, to represent precast pipe and precast producers across Canada. And so the Canadian Concrete Pipe and Precast Association was developed. Now, our tagline is build on our strength, which indicates the strength of concrete pipe as a reinforced structure. And so that message suits well with the presentation today. You can find more information at ccppa.ca. So let's just start with a general definition of excess soils. Soils that is excavated from a project site that cannot be reused will be deemed excess soil. In Ontario, the generation of excess soils is not going to go away as the industry continues to invest in new infrastructure. So when we have excess soils, we have to answer some simple questions, or maybe more complicated, depending how you look at it. But what is the condition of the soil? Where are you going to dispose of that soil, and who's going to take it? It's a surmountable challenge when you look at this issue of excess soils, just based on the quantity that currently goes to Ontario landfill sites, which is 25 million cubic meters. So if you want to equate that, that is filling the Rogers Center 16 times, or just to equate it to your kid's toy, that is roughly 700 million Tonka truck toys, Tonka truck being filled up with excess soil. So quite a bit of material. So no doubt the regulation has introduced some complexity in dealing with surplus soil during infrastructure builds. Over the past few months, CCPPA has had the opportunity to speak with municipal owners about the regulation, and we've heard some descriptors like more cost, it's going to get a lot more complicated, and it's going to cause grief. The Ontario Regulation 406-19 has created challenges such as resources. More knowledge and people are going to be again involved, such as a qualified person or those testing the soils. Logistics, the complexity of registering your project in the soil, issuing reports, and using a tracking system for that information. The liability aspects of possibly being liable for improper dumping or even contamination of sites. So all of this obviously is going to come with a cost. Certainly the new regulation does pose many challenges that might seem daunting. People might start looking at your typical ceremonial groundbreaking ceremonies in a different light with the concern of creating excess soils. That's just a little bit of humor on my part in terms of OREG 406-19. But like all things new, there is a steep learning curve at times. In general, OREG 406-19 is going to provide an overall benefit to the environment with the reduction of greenhouse gases, less trucking possibly, and less equipment that would be used. Looking at our resources, bringing careful attention and management to some of the virgin aggregate resources that we have. Landfill sites, being able to extend the service life of these facilities. And certainly with design, looking at opportunities where we can bring innovation or different angles of thought in terms of what to do with excess soils. So that is part of what our perspective is on the new regulation dealing with excess soils. So the potential for concrete pipe to reduce the generation of excess soils rests on this detail that is here on the screen. And many of you who are designing buried pipe infrastructure will be familiar with it because it is OPSD 802.030. And this is for concrete beddings that is used for concrete pipe and also known as rigid pipe. So the ministry released a best management practice intended to manage excess soil in a manner that promotes sustainability and protects the natural environment. The new regulation provides guidance towards achieving that sustainability with the environment in mind. Although all three factors of the environment, the economy, and society are interdependent with each other, the economic and social impacts are constrained by the environmental factors. With careful consideration for material use when installing concrete pipe, there can be beneficial reuse of native materials and hence an opportunity to reduce the excess soils. In doing so, concrete pipe will play an important role in building sustainable buried infrastructure. So here I've highlighted an excerpt taken from that best management practice that helps to set the stage for today. So just reading a bit of the excerpt, looking for a beneficial reuse at the site where the soil was originally excavated. So the meaning here is a chance to reuse the excavated soil before it becomes excess soil is key to any project. Secondly, with this excerpt, soil management should be integrated into all aspects of the planning process from the initial concept. So the meaning here is it's key to identify and establish those opportunities during the design stage when material specifications are being put in place. This detail, the previous slide, brings us to this OPS standard, and there's a lot to unpack here, so we'll look at some different components of this standard. There's primarily three zones of soil material required for the installation of concrete pipe. You have the bedding material, the cover material, and the backfill material. So for beddings, OPSD illustrates two types of beddings. You've got a class B bedding, which is granular material brought up to the spring line of the pipe or half diameter of the pipe. And then you also have with that a class C bedding, which is less granular, taken up to 0.15 diameter of the pipe. Above that, you have the cover material, which is your next zone of material that is placed over the bedding. And then above the cover material, you have your backfill material. To repeat the point I made in the previous slide about the cover material, concrete pipe's ability to support load is not impacted by the soil material in this zone called the cover material. Hence, just about any material can be used around the pipe, including select native soils excavated and deemed possibly as excess soils. So there lies the opportunity to reduce the volume of potential excess soils generated during pipe installations. At present, this reuse option of native materials is not being exercised for many pipe installations. The two last points I want to quickly make with this OPSD. One, native soils are sometimes used for the backfill zone above the cover material, so that's a good practice of reusing material. And two, when you look at the Class B and Class C beddings, each of these require variable amounts of granular material, which means there's equally the opportunity to use a variable amount of excess soils in place. So in that case, putting some of that native material back into the zone of the cover material. So to help quantify some of the numbers related to excess soils or its potential reuse, the industry created this calculator that is used to calculate the volumes of excess soil. The calculator will take a full quantity of material that has to be excavated, and you can break it down according to bedding material as well as the cover material. So in this example, and we're not going to look at any of these numbers in detail, but in this example, we used the installation of 100 meters linear length of 1200 millimeter concrete pipe. So the calculator shows us for that 100 linear meters of 1200 millimeter concrete pipe, that when we use a B bedding material, we would generate 14 truckloads of excess soil. You're looking at the C bedding, which if you recall is less granular material, we would generate only 8 truckloads of excess soil. The difference in these numbers, again, is related to the amount of granular bedding that is supporting the concrete pipe. But keep in mind, though, when we look at something like a calculator like this, which is calculating the volume of material, you should apply a factor of 2 when we look at, say, the environmental or the logistical impacts, because ultimately you will be exporting the excess soil from the site, but then having to import granular material back to the site. It's also important that you recognize that for designers and specifiers that the opportunity to reduce excess soils will vary between different types of pipe materials as well as different types of installation. Take, for example, a rigid pipe on the left and a flexible pipe on the right. So just for some of the attendees' purposes, if a flexible pipe would be described as a steel or plastic pipe. So flexible pipe require quite a bit different amounts of granular material in order to support the pipe. And we define this as the embedment. It's granular material that's taken below the pipe and is to extend up to 300 millimeters above the pipe. This granular material is well compacted in order to give passive support to the flexible pipe system. So intuitively, when we look at this, the requirement for a full granular embedment, when we compare between the rigid and the flexible pipes, is roughly 2 times the amount of granular material that would be required, or also looking at it as 2 times the amount of excess soil that would be exported. Unfortunately, some municipal specifications that we see do not differentiate the bedding requirements between a rigid pipe and a flexible pipe. And in doing so, obviously, this is adding more cost to the installation of the concrete pipe because that full embedment of granular is not needed. But for the purposes of today's presentation, it's not allowing for the beneficial reuse of bringing that native material back into around the concrete pipe as the cover material. To quantify the differences then between different types of bedding and different types of pipe materials, again, we've used a calculator here, and then you can see added to our initial calculations for the B bedding and C bedding. We also have the requirements for trucking the material related to flexible pipe, the excess soil, which is again roughly that factor of 2 as a quick estimation. And also, again, keep in mind that with this type of logistics and environmental impact, factor of 2 related to exporting and importing the material to the job site. We also want to look at, what is the effect over different diameters of pipes. So we just did a random range from 450 millimeters up to 1500 millimeter diameter pipe. And you can see roughly, again, the difference with rigid and flexible pipes is roughly a factor of 2.3 on average when you look at the volume of materials that's being generated as excess soil. So most installation details that designers or engineers may be looking at is typically presented as an ideal trench installation. So what I mean by that is you've got good soils that are going to maintain the excavation and provide a narrow type of excavation we see here and as defined as a trench type installation. So what happens when the in situ material quality of that material is poor, say a type 2 or type 3? Well, naturally that trench detail is going to be not maintained, it will be lost and will widen. And this is not a good thing when we're talking about trying to reduce the generation of excess soils. So for design purposes, when we talk about a concrete pipe, that excavation will moderately widen. But in this case here, the designer can revert to a higher strength of pipe in order to compensate for the reduced support of the soil around the pipe. In the case of a flexible pipe, the material has to be removed and replaced with good quality granular material in order, again, to provide that modified or improved soil stiffness that's required to support the pipe. So at times it can be as much as up to 2 to 5 times the actual diameter of the pipe. So this is going to create a much wider installation of pipe and therefore generate quite a bit more excess soils. And obviously that's not a good challenge to have. So the opportunity to use and reduce excess soils during installations using concrete pipe is being recognized, and we've seen it in a couple publications that have published articles related to this effect. And I'd be glad to pass these on to any of our attendees today if you'd like to have a read of the potential use with concrete pipe to reduce excess soils. So for designers and specifiers, there's a lot of good information already contained in OPSS 401, which defines requirements for trenching, backfilling, and compaction, identifies the cover material and the types of soils that can be used, and does identify native materials for its use. In OPSS 1010, different sieve gradations are provided in Table 2. And there is one grouping of soil called select subgrade material. And this has a more open range of gradations, which might be suitable to capturing some of the native materials on a project site. OPSS 501 defines different requirements for compaction. And then, of course, OPSD 802.030 that we've spent a lot of time already looking at provides the details needed for installation requirements. So for most municipal owners, now is a good time to actually review your specifications in the context of finding ways to reduce generating excess soils. I mentioned this earlier in the presentation that the installation and backfilling requirements for concrete pipe are not necessarily wrong the way they currently are, but they certainly do not optimize cost savings for concrete pipe or the reuse of native materials for those concrete pipe installations. And so these are just some of the examples that I pulled off where if looking at these details further, there could be opportunities to bring the possible excess soil back into the installation of the concrete pipe. And then of course, also to mention again, the different types of beddings. Class B, which is your most common typical bedding used for concrete pipe, but the alternative to even consider at times a Class C bedding for concrete pipe. So one example that we can point to was with the City of Ottawa, which, just like any other municipality, looks at reviewing its municipal specifications on a 2-year basis, and they actually bring stakeholders from industry into those discussions of improving their specifications. And so they're always trying to look for ways to improve the specs so that they can help reduce costs and bring a more reliable, cost-effective way of building sustainable infrastructure. So the city was also monitoring some of the developments with excess soils. They've worked with the ministry, provided input. So in 2020, the review that took place with the City of Ottawa, again, they brought in industry. And at that time, the industry stakeholders had actually proposed changes to the current bedding and backfill specifications for concrete pipe. And this would, as a proposal, significantly reduce the generation of excess soils and meet the city's, again, directives for sustainability. Hence, they created in 2020 an add-on to their specification, as you can see here, highlighted in blue, to adopt select subgrade material. And this new material would have a 100% passing through the 37.5 sieve gradation. So that would give them opportunity to increase the opportunity to be using some of those native materials in place before they became or be deemed as excess soils. So it's examples like this where municipalities can take the opportunity to reuse more excavated materials and minimize those excess soils. So in terms of taking measures to reduce excess soils, I guess we kind of have a 4-step recommendation here that we propose. The first is to differentiate the installation details between rigid pipe and flexible pipe. So that's easily referred to in OPS, and we've talked about that earlier just in terms of the amount of granular bedding that would be needed for both a rigid pipe and a flexible pipe. Step 2 would be to ensure the installation specifications for concrete pipe support the use of select native material, both in the cover zone as well as the backfill zone. So we mentioned that the backfill zone is already practiced to some degree, but the opportunity has not been practiced to use the native materials in that area we call the cover material. Step 3, to manage the use of select native materials to address placement and compaction variances of these soils. So obviously you're not working with the granular material that you're typically used to. It will obviously have different, the native materials will obviously have different mechanical properties. And so there may have to be a little bit of management in terms of using those different materials in order to get the proper installation and support for the concrete pipe. And then lastly, 4 is to review the potential reduction of excess soils across all projects, and to certainly look at it in terms of how the rigid pipe can reduce the amount of excess soils. So as mentioned from the start, we're looking at ways to take the bite out of excess soils to help minimize excess soils. And with good specifications in place, here are some of the expected benefits we would see with excess soils when using concrete pipe. The first one would be just the overall reduction in the volume of those excess soils. With that, we can see where the cover material is going to provide that opportunity. Secondly, there's going to be a reduction in the costs and the logistics. There's going to be less trucking and less management just based on the less volume of excess soils. The next would be a reduction in the carbon footprint. Again, reducing the amount of trucking and transportation of the excess soils away from site and bringing in new imported material is going to help reduce the carbon footprint. Reduced environmental impact, the ability now to manage and protect some of the virgin aggregate resources because we are using less of that high quality granular material around the pipe. And then lastly, one thing that we really didn't touch upon today is site disruption. There is an opportunity with concrete pipe to be looking at different methods of installation, like trenchless methods, jacking pipe or microtunneling pipe. And although it will still generate some amount of excess soils, it would be a different quantity than what is generated, say, through an open cut installation of concrete pipe. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be glad to take any questions there may be.
Thank you, Enrico. Dan, do we have questions for Enrico?
Not yet. Hi, Enrico.
Hey, Dan.
Look forward to seeing you Friday night.
Yeah.
Let's just, wait just a few seconds to give people a chance to ask.
Sure.
Maybe Salim, you can ask a question if you have.
Yeah. I was thinking, thank you, Enrico, for the nudge to review our specifications. So your presentation, you looked at it from the point of view of excess soils. Do you have any idea in terms of if you brought in the cost of, comparison between flexible pipe and concrete pipe and did a life cycle cost, and including, the recommendations that you have suggested, could we, look at that, and maybe, that would give, our members a clear idea on, what would be best for their municipalities?
Yeah, for sure. No, certainly that would give a much broader scope. And I think some of the municipal owners are slowly moving towards that type of a thought process and perspective, with building infrastructure. So we've not incorporated that level of detail yet at this point. We're strictly kind of looking at an individual installation of pipe and the volume, like a volume-based approach in terms of analysis, and just strictly looking at, how that volume of excess soil can be reduced. One of the questions is asked different times when we've presented on this topic is, what would be the cost savings? And, for us, unfortunately, that's difficult to answer. I think even a municipality couldn't answer that at this point. As this new regulation is coming into play, people are learning. And as they enter different project tenders, are realizing, some of the cost implications with any scenario, whether it's, using a proposal like we've suggested here today or not. So I think some of that costing is going to get a little more accurate and a little more accountable to what are the true costs. But certainly, looking at that broader scope could ultimately be where we go with this type of detail.
Thank you, Enrico.
We do have a question. I'll read it. It's from Evan Cassidy. Very good presentation, Enrico. Is there any concerns, thoughts regarding reducing free draining areas around pipes? I assume reducing your granular material could not be done if a frost taper is required.
Right. I guess some of those type of considerations, Evan, and thanks for the question, would be, more pertinent to the project designers familiar with not only just putting in the linear installation of a pipe, but also building that road structure. So yeah, I guess maybe if you're into a more shallow installation where some of those granulars are already into the envelope of the pipe installation, then there's probably more sense just to maybe continue, with that granular material. And then I guess it also would depend on where the water table is at. But yeah, there would be some of that consideration to make here. Ultimately, the effect of frost at the deeper depths, as long as, we're beyond that 1.5 meters, I guess is the approximate depth, then you should be clear of that zone.
Okay, thank you. There are no further questions, Enrico.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Salim.
Thank you, Enrico. So we're doing good for time. We're going to change it up and move it to the next presentation, which is a new topic, at least for me. So the presentation is opportunities for municipalities in the next generation of nuclear technologies. Our presenter is David Campbell. David is the director for the Bruce Power Center for Next Generation Nuclear, a clean energy think tank located in Ontario, Canada. The center is dedicated to exploring the role of nuclear energy in the net zero transition. David has spent his career studying energy and economic issues in both the public and private sectors, including as an advisor to the Ministry of Energy and a policy expert for Deloitte. He holds a Master's of Public Policy from Harvard University and is a recipient of the Distinguished Action Canada Fellowship. Welcome, David.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'll just bring up my screen here. There we go. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. As Celine mentioned, I'm David Campbell. I'm the director of the Bruce Power Center for Next Generation Nuclear, which is housed out of the Nuclear Innovation Institute in Bruce County, Ontario. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do at the center, who we are, but then with a particular focus on one of the technologies that we study, which I think will be of interest to this group, which is hydrogen. And just at the start, let me say I'm a public policy guy, as you could tell from the introduction. So I love being around engineers. I spend a lot of my time around them. My perspective on these things is really around the public policy perspective and what both governments and business can do to sort of unlock these technologies. So to begin, that's exactly what we are at the Center for Next Generation Nuclear. So we have a focus on a few different technologies, which I'll get to in a minute, but really born out of a fundamental belief and recognition that in order for Canada and the world to get to net zero emissions, nuclear power is going to be absolutely critical, both existing nuclear and these emerging technologies that are just coming out now. We operate out of the Nuclear Innovation Institute, which is a nonprofit research hub in Bruce County. And what the NII does is it capitalizes on the fact that there are so many companies that have come to the region, largely driven by refurbishment at the Bruce Power nuclear plant. But we want to ensure that that creates sort of a clean energy hub that lasts well beyond just the refurbishment schedule. And part of the reason why Bruce County is such a great location for this kind of work is beyond refurbishment, which has brought all of these energy companies into the region. Then the county also has advantages like natural assets, land, fresh water, as well as local buy-in and public support. There's a lot of understanding and appreciation for energy projects and what they can do. So these features really make the region, as I say here, an ideal site for the deployment of new energy technologies. So looking at Canada today, we have a relatively clean electricity grid. The picture in Ontario is even better than this national picture, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But looking nationally, something like 82% here of our national grid is already powered by clean technologies. A lot of the gas, oil, coal, that's happening out in the Western provinces. That's in the process of being phased out. But the point here is that our electricity system is already relatively clean, which is a great story, but it also means that the future decarbonization challenge is going to get a lot more difficult. We need to move on to sectors that are much harder to decarbonize, either through electrification or through fuel switching, as we'll talk about with hydrogen. But that's what we need for sectors like home heating and buildings, transport, everything from personal vehicles to much larger things like trains and trucks. And then with heavy industry, shipping is a major challenge, steel and cement, and agriculture, which of course in the Bruce region is a huge part of our economy, that also is going to need a lot of help to really become decarbonized. So we focus on 4 technologies at the center. The first one being CANDU, the technology behind all nuclear reactors in Canada, including at Bruce Power. And really the belief that that fleet needs to be maintained and even expanded to meet our future electrification needs. We also look at small modular reactors, modular nuclear reactors, which you may have heard of. These can range in size and therefore application, but everywhere from a size that would be appropriate for adding to the grid to much smaller ones that could do things like power remote northern communities or individual steel or cement facilities, things like that. I'm not going to talk about those as much today, but if folks are interested, we can also talk about that in the Q&A. We also look at fusion technology. A Canadian company called General Fusion, based out of Vancouver, is on our steering committee. They're one of the leading fusion companies in the world. I know fusion is something that has a reputation for always being 10 years away and then never materializing. There's a lot of exciting things going on in fusion right now that actually make it seem like this is getting pretty close to commercialization. Some test plants being built around the world and that sort of thing. And finally, hydrogen, which, as I said, I'm going to focus on today. So why are we so interested in hydrogen? Well, you may know hydrogen can be produced easily using just electricity and water as your inputs, just using electrolysis. And if the electricity you're using there is clean, the result is a clean fuel that can act as a substitute for carbon-based fuels in all sorts of different applications. And so through its life cycle, the only emissions of hydrogen as a fuel, therefore, are oxygen and water, has a virtually limitless supply, and it can be used for, as I said, all sorts of applications. We'll get into some of them later, especially as they relate to the Bruce region and to municipalities. But as I have a picture here of an industrial plant, that's one of the biggest ones. You imagine a steel plant, the amount of heat and pure energy that's needed there, that can be substituted with hydrogen being used as the fuel. There are already some plants internationally that are doing this and producing green steel, as they say. And there's real promise to be able to do that here in Canada as well. Of course, our focus is on how nuclear energy can play a role in this. So nuclear as your source of clean electricity, also a reliable baseload source, can provide that consistent supply that's going to be needed for a future hydrogen economy. So hydrogen is actually already pretty well developed in Canada. We're one of the top 10 hydrogen producers in the world. The scale of that is nowhere close to what is envisioned for the future, but nonetheless, we're in the top 10. Most of that is being produced today through steam methane reforming, which is a pretty carbon intensive process. So for that to be scaled, that's going to have to be shifted to cleaner processes, mostly electrolysis, like I mentioned. We also have over 100 established companies working in the hydrogen space in Canada, including a bunch in the Bruce region. And over 90% of the global hydrogen bus fleet is powered by fuel cells developed and produced in Canada. Now, the vision for 2050, the federal government has released a national hydrogen strategy. And that strategy envisions Canada becoming one of the top 3 global producers of hydrogen, and that being clean hydrogen by 2050. Up to 30% of end use energy, it's projected, could come from hydrogen. So that's a huge substitution, a huge shift. And that would be powering over 5 million fuel cell electric vehicles on the road, hydrogen powered vehicles, and around 350,000 jobs the national government is projecting could come in the hydrogen space by 2050. So along with the national hydrogen strategy, there's a real policy space emerging federally aimed to support hydrogen development and make this sort of vision for the future come to pass. So the strategy itself has 32 recommendations across 8 pillars. It's led to the formation of a bunch of working groups that are now working on how to roll this out on the ground, including one focused on nuclear hydrogen, which we sit on. The government, as you know, also has a carbon price in place. This is currently $50 a ton, which frankly is not all that material on when it comes to the type of fuel switching that we're talking about. But by 2030, it's scheduled to rise to $170 per ton. At that level, you start to see the economics of something like hydrogen come much more into play as carbon-based fuels become more expensive. And accompanying that on the other side, on the incentivizing clean fuel side, the federal government's also introduced the Clean Fuels Standard, which requires a 13% reduction in carbon intensity of fuels by 2030, has a number of funding sources, including a $1.5 billion fund for encouraging production and adoption of zero emission vehicles. So this has led to all sorts of opportunities to help build electrolyzer facilities, to help folks buy things like hydrogen powered buses and so forth. All these things that are required to really seed the hydrogen economy. And so partly building on that, Canada has a number of promising hydrogen projects already underway. Ballard Power in Burnaby, BC, that's the company that produces the batteries for the fuel cell batteries for buses that I was mentioning earlier. So they're the largest supplier in the world. The Transition Accelerator is a project underway in Edmonton that's trying to build a hydrogen transport corridor. I believe it's between Edmonton and Calgary, basically a corridor of entirely hydrogen powered shipping. Enbridge here in Ontario has a natural gas blending pilot underway. This is another one of the really promising applications for hydrogen, is to be blended with our natural gas system and reduce the carbon intensity of that system. So Enbridge is beginning to do that here in Ontario. And then in Quebec, in Varennes, they're in the process of building a 90 megawatt electrolyzer facility, which I believe will be the largest in the world. I think a lot of that hydrogen that's coming from Quebec's clean hydroelectricity supply. And I believe a lot of that hydrogen will actually be exported to Europe, where more intensive carbon pricing is leading a lot of businesses to really look for these sort of clean fuel solutions. And then here in Bruce County, we've launched our own feasibility study. It's just, I'll touch on it in a minute, but it's just nearing completion now. And it's looking into the viability of hydrogen produced from nuclear power here locally, and then also consumed and used locally. Now, the reason we're doing that study, the reason we think it's so exciting, is because Ontario actually has an even cleaner grid, even by Canadian standards. We have 93% emissions-free energy right now, anchored by our baseload of nuclear power. Nuclear supplies the majority of that, 60% the electricity in Ontario. And there's also all sorts of dynamics to the market, such as surplus baseload at times, sometimes overnight. There's renewable sources that when they come online, we don't always need the energy. And so hydrogen can also act as a sort of energy storage in all these different scenarios, where when there's surplus electricity, we can use that to create hydrogen and then later use that hydrogen to produce electricity in a turbine or for any of these other applications that I'm talking about. So for those reasons, we think there's real potential for hydrogen in Ontario in particular. And so, as I said, we launched a study to look into a local pilot project of what that could look like. It looked at the technical feasibility for hydrogen production, as well as the business case in the local market. This was just for a small facility around 5 megawatts, either on the Bruce Power site or nearby. The results aren't out yet. They'll be coming out in the next couple of months. But what I can say is that in terms of technical feasibility, as we expected, we confirmed that all the technology already exists. You can install an electrolyzer, you can start making hydrogen tomorrow, you can use it in battery powered or fuel cell powered vehicles, all sorts of applications. All of that exists. The business case is where help is needed. But as these federal programs are starting up, and I didn't mention, but the Ontario government also is planning to release a hydrogen strategy probably sometime this winter that may have more funding sources associated with it. All of these government programs are starting to seed the possibility that you could start a hydrogen market today. And then in the future, as carbon prices, or as the price for carbon fuels increases, the price for hydrogen technologies fall as we get better at these things, then the business case will cease to need the government support anymore. So a project like this one, this is a way to get our foot in the water early, develop some expertise, learn some of the lessons, so that we'll be ready to take advantage as the hydrogen economy scales further. So, we explored a lot of the sort of key hydrogen applications that exist out there. I mentioned industrial heat around steel or cement plants. Transportation is maybe the biggest one where there actually is an economic case today, especially with all the federal and provincial subsidies available. So not so much for personal vehicles. Electric vehicles have more or less won out on that in that competition, it seems. But larger vehicles like buses, when it comes to municipal fleets, like transport trucks, batteries are not as practical. And so hydrogen really becomes a competitive application there for decarbonizing that sector. Also, electricity generation. As I mentioned, hydrogen can essentially be used as energy storage, creating it when you have surplus electricity, using it in a turbine later to create the electricity when you really need it. So that's a promising application. And finally, natural gas blending. That Enbridge project in Ontario, I think they're blending to about 2% right now, 2% hydrogen to 98% natural gas. In Europe, they're already experimenting with blending up to 10%. That's probably about the limit of what you could do with existing infrastructure. But then if you start looking into transitioning existing infrastructure, you could have possibilities for even more. So that's a market that has real potential for the future. In terms of what all that means for municipalities, as I mentioned, clean bus fleets are already being rolled out. I think there's a ton of potential there. Heating for buildings is another big one that is beginning to emerge as an application. Electricity production, like I mentioned, and just economic development. I mentioned how there's more than 100 companies in Canada working in the hydrogen space. A lot of those are in the Bruce region, and we found that as more companies have arrived, then it's led to a bit of cluster where more companies are choosing to locate in the region, from companies that produce electrolyzers to companies that sort of act as the middlemen purchasing and selling hydrogen to hydrogen users. All of this is turning into a bit of a cluster in the Bruce region. And I think we're going to see in the future municipalities and regions competing for this more as a way of economic development, attracting these sort of companies. So just to conclude, these are some of the key questions I think about when I think about the future of the hydrogen economy. So a lot of what I've talked about, as I've said, it's an emerging space, but it will probably experience a lot of growth in sort of the next 5 years, but we're still at the earliest part of that curve right now. So there's some key questions that need to be answered for it to expand further. Things like the public awareness and support for clean hydrogen, where to place electrolyzers. As I mentioned, this is one of the things we are looking at in our study is, should we put the electrolyzer right on site at Bruce Power, right beside the generating station? Or is it better taking electricity from the grid somewhere nearby? Is there sort of open questions that depend on the economics and different practicalities of how the market's going to evolve? On the policymaking side, will governments provide the incentives needed to start the market? Well, as I mentioned, at the federal and provincial level, they're already starting on that. But it's early and there's still a lot of opportunity for people to take up those programs. So that's going to be really crucial. And particularly at the municipal level, it starts to become relevant around regulations, codes, and standards being adopted to make sure that hydrogen is feasible and safe in its use. And on the infrastructure side, how do we build the pipelines and fueling stations that are going to be needed to sort of spread a hydrogen economy? One other question, I don't focus on it too much on this slide, but I think a key question not talked about often enough in the hydrogen sector is also how do we begin building the social license and awareness that will really be needed for widespread hydrogen adoption. When I talk to people about hydrogen, so often still today, the first thing that comes to mind is the Hindenburg. That's not really an accurate picture of how the hydrogen economy looks today, but that's, for a lot of people, that's what they've been introduced to. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done now to start seeding that idea. We've seen hydrogen really pick up in the media. That's great. That's a good start. But there's still a lot that needs to be done around the public education side. All of these questions, I think, naturally lend themselves to the conclusion that you've just got to start building and experimenting now. That's what we hope for with our feasibility study into just a small electrolyzer in the Bruce region. I hope a lot more folks jump on that train and start doing the same thing, because I think that's how we're going to answer these questions, is through commitment and action, through experimentation, and beginning to learn more about this sector and what it can and should look like in the future. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions, but thank you again so much for having me.
Thank you, David. Dan, are there any questions? David?
Not yet, Salim, but let's give the delegates a few seconds to type their questions if any are coming in.
Okay, I have a question for David. David, so our municipality has recently sort of dipped our toes into electric buses, and they are powered by hydro. So you take hydro to charge the batteries, and then you run the buses. So if hydrogen were an option, what would it take to convert a bus? Like, I'm not familiar with the technology. Is it the same battery that's in the bus? You can charge with a hydrogen or through hydro, or is it totally different infrastructure?
Yeah, it's totally different. So the fuel cell vehicles use need to come to a fueling station and get fueled up with hydrogen, and then they use internal fuel cells, which is a different kind of engine to power the bus. So it actually does, yeah, require a different kind of engine. I don't think you would. I'm not an expert on it, but I don't think you would ever convert an electric powered bus to a fuel cell bus. I think you'd want to start by buying the fuel cell bus in the first place. And so there's lots of federal programs for that available. A lot of the same programs actually that support the purchase of electric powered buses also support hydrogen powered buses. They're kind of agnostic to the technology. They just want to encourage the adoption of clean vehicles. But yeah, so anyway, I don't think you would retrofit. You'd want to start with hydrogen bus.
Has there been a study to compare the cost, life cycle cost of running a bus that is powered by hydro as opposed to powered by hydrogen?
There definitely have, and I don't have any sort of numbers that come to mind, but my understanding is that hydrogen is actually, but what has been holding it back is hydrogen supply. Once hydrogen supply becomes more widely available, what really makes electric buses challenging is the size of the batteries required and the amount of excess energy that's spent just sort of carting around that battery. And so that's what really shifts the economics. But as I say, we need hydrogen to be available before that can really take off. Today, there is a hydrogen market, but most of that hydrogen is through the steam methane reforming, so it's not clean yet. I believe federal programs still support the purchase of hydrogen-powered buses, regardless of where the hydrogen is coming from, under the anticipation that in the future, there's going to be a real clean hydrogen supply that can be used.
Okay, thank you, David.
Salim, we don't have any questions.
I think it's a new topic for our members. Okay, on behalf of the MEA, David, thank you for your presentation. And like other presenters, we'll be sending you a gift certificate as a token of appreciation. Thank you so much.
That's very generous. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right, moving right on. Our next presentation on Is road safety infrastructure part of your asset management plan? Our presenter is Jesse Hopkins. Jesse has over 14 years of roadside safety product experience and has gained extensive industry knowledge with respect to the products specified, installed, and maintained on Canadian roadways. He conducted roadside safety training sessions, seminars, and symposiums across the country and to a variety of audiences, including contractors, engineers, designers, politicians, and policymakers. Jesse is currently the co-chair of the Ontario Road Safety Infrastructure Coalition and the Ontario Road Builders Association Highway Safety Systems Subcommittee. Over the last 10 years, he has worked tirelessly with various road agencies, including the Ministry of Transportation Ontario, acting as a resource of roadside safety product knowledge. Welcome, Jesse.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Would now be the time you'd like me to share my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's great. If you could just let me know when you're able to see the slide deck up there.
Yep, we're good, Jesse.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Well, thank you, Salim. I really appreciate the kind introduction. Again, my name is Jesse Hopkins, and I am a co-chair with ORSIC, and that is a coalition that hopefully through the session we learn a little bit more about. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you to the folks that have organized the 61st annual MEA conference. I appreciate being included in this. This is actually the first time I've attended as well as spoken at an MEA conference, so I'm excited to get our message out there and hopefully get some questions at the end. And as you know, the topic today is road safety infrastructure part of your asset management plan? So on the agenda on my end, I will talk about myself just a little bit, as well as some background on ORSIC, as well as our current campaign, which is Safety on Your Side. I'm going to talk a little bit about MASH, which I'm hoping folks that are on this virtual call right now have heard of MASH and what it stands for and where we're at with respect to municipal and provincial roads here. I'm going to talk a little bit about road safety infrastructure meshed with Vision Zero. I'm going to discuss critical safety assets, asset management, and then touch upon hardware performance, as well as a little bit about education. So Celine, you already provided a great background on myself. I guess on my end, I've been in this industry now for just over 16 years. I'm almost at 17 now. It's been a while that I've been working with road safety product. And what's interesting is I started within this business as a laborer, installing guide rail, crash systems, end treatment, sign supports. You name a road safety device that could be potentially impacted by a car, and the odds are I've installed it or maintained it. And through the course of my career, I've somewhat evolved into a person that is dealing with specification building, positive promotion, and lobbying of industry. And one of my passions is actually teaching, education and training. My background is a joint honors degree in cultural anthropology and classics, and the life plan was to actually go back into teaching. But roadside safety is to me a really interesting topic, and it's one that once you get talking about all these different devices, it's a captivating topic, and I really enjoy speaking to it. I'm passionate about it, that I had a hard time leaving the industry. So it's been almost 17 years now that I've been talking about these types of products, and I'm very, very happy to work with the folks within ORSIC, dealing with road safety, as well as sitting as a co-chair position on the Highway Safety Systems Subcommittee within ORBA. So a little bit of background on road safety, and I'm just going to roll through this. Over the last 5 years, more road safety infrastructure specifications have changed provincially in Ontario than ever before. With advancements in crash testing guidelines and a commitment to MASH, tested infrastructure, we're now operating with some of the safest and most sophisticated technology on our roads and highways. Guide rail, end terminals, cable guide rail, crash cushions, and even small and intermediate sign supports have been revised provincially to promote this critical crash-worthy update. Vehicle safety has evolved, geometric design has evolved, so too have the road safety infrastructure devices and technologies that are out on our provincial and municipal road network. So one of my jobs is to make sure that folks understand these different devices and why these specifications have changed. So if the questions has risen, what is ORSIC? ORSIC stands for the Ontario Road Safety Infrastructure Coalition. We're a newly formed coalition. We've been around since, well, I'd say early 2020, and we're a coalition of industry professionals. Our mission is to educate and create awareness surrounding the importance of road safety infrastructure. ORSIC is committed to help navigate and overcome the challenges of aging or legacy safety infrastructure in Ontario. Roadside safety infrastructure devices, such as the ones I've mentioned before, are the topic of conversation today, and they had been the topic of conversation for our group for a number of years. Our ultimate goal is to generate awareness and ensure safe roads through state-of-the-art infrastructure, technology, and road user education. So on a side note, we strive to educate the traveling public as to the critical role road safety devices play in keeping motorists, road workers, and emergency services staff safe. So through ORSIC and our group of road safety professionals, we have a campaign we've been working on for the last year, and the campaign is called Safety on Your Side. With Safety on Your Side, we're looking to raise awareness of the importance of proper and modern road safety infrastructure. We aim to educate Ontario communities on the types of safety devices and their functionalities to ensure safe roads. It's one thing to teach folks about guide rail crash systems and end treatment, but it's another thing altogether to fully understand their functionality, why devices are placed in certain areas, or perhaps how they're tested. Through Safety on Your Side, we're also looking to encourage conversations on digital channels. So you'll be able to find us on all levels of social media, including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and even TikTok. We've been adding videos there as well. And we support provincial efforts to reduce the number of accidents on the road and to lessen their severity. These devices that we're talking about through this short session are life-saving devices. Guide rail crash system end treatments are put in areas where we want to make the roads a safer place. There's never been a more important time to invest and generate awareness of these changes and the importance of critical safety infrastructure. So I talked about MASH very, very briefly, and I'm hoping folks on the call right now understand what MASH is. MASH is a guideline, uniform guideline for crash testing permanent and temporary highway safety products. So MASH is a manual where you will find out how to test and what a pass and a fail looks like on things like longitudinal barriers, end terminals, crash cushions, work zone attenuation, and support structures. MASH is the universal guideline that will tell us how a test needs to be run and what the conditions of the test must look like after the test is complete to constitute a pass or a fail. So I've got an interesting quote here, and ORSIC actually put together a white paper earlier this year where I'm going to make note to it a little bit later on. But within that white paper, we have a quote where all road users have a right to be safe on our roads, regardless of the mode of transportation. For drivers, road safety hardware like guide rail, cable guide rail, and attenuators have a significant role in road safety and are an asset that require inspection and regular maintenance by trained individuals. There's no second chance with road safety hardware. It must operate as designed every time. And that's a quote from Brian Anderson with Intact Public Entities. And again, that quote was provided for our white paper. So what is road safety infrastructure? We talk about all these devices, but it's kind of interesting to see the actual definition coming from the FHWA, which is the Federal Highway Administration. Roadside safety hardware is part of the highway infrastructure that functions to reduce crash severity. Roadside design provides for a clear, recoverable area where feasible, and where roadsides cannot be designed free of fixed objects, crash-worthy roadside safety hardware is used to reduce risk. Roadside barriers are designed to contain and redirect vehicles. Barriers are installed only in locations where there's potential for greater harm, such as crossing into oncoming traffic, rolling over a steep slope, or perhaps running into maybe some trees at the roadside. When roadside assets are necessary, such as signs and luminaires, supports that have safety design features to break away in a crash so that they can pose minimal risk to motorists. So an interesting quote here on the left, just speaking to MASH. The ongoing need for updated crash test guidelines every 7 to 18 years is primarily based on changes to the vehicle fleet, along with increased knowledge gained from in-service evaluations. MASH 2016, which is the current edition of MASH that we are using here in Ontario, is the culmination of over 50 years of crash testing experience and collective expertise of professionals in the field of roadside safety design. And that's coming from Mark Ayton, and that as well was provided for our white paper. I've got a video here just to showcase what happens running into an intermediate sign support, where we don't want the intermediate sign support to be a hazard at the side of the road. So we follow crash test guidelines and the units are made breakaway. Again, making that crash less severe and potentially saving lives. How does Vision Zero work into all of this? Well, I think we all know that Vision Zero is an industry initiative that positively promotes the reduction of serious injuries and fatalities on our road network in Canada. Vision Zero applies to a variety of disciplines in road safety, one of which is roadside safety hardware. So what I've done in a previous session is taken the concept of Vision Zero, bringing fatalities on our road down to zero. And if you look at Vision Zero as an overarching theme, I firmly believe in it, and I firmly feel like Vision Zero is the way to go. But I do feel like Vision Zero needs to be broken down into subsets. And if we break Vision Zero down into the context of road safety infrastructure, we can look at Vision Zero through the lens of a road safety professional. Our province has been very forward-thinking with safety devices that are specified on current capital programs. Now it's time to look back at all the legacy safety infrastructure that's been on our roads for over 30 years and perhaps bring them to a degree of safety that we deem acceptable in 2021. So again, a Vision Zero goal should be updated roadside safety infrastructure. So fact, Vision Zero is defined by a commitment to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. Also fact, the role of roadside safety infrastructure is to make accidents less severe, reducing serious injury and fatality. So consequently, by looking at these two as synonymous with one another, the design, testing, implementation, installation, and maintenance of roadside safety hardware is actually a critical step in the Vision Zero process. And to me, it's a very primary step. It's one of the first ones, making sure we're using the right devices and understanding what infrastructure we currently have on our road network. So when it comes to road safety infrastructure, the question does tend to pop up. Are critical safety infrastructure devices like steel beam guide rail, end terminal, and breakaway sign supports assets? And subsequently, if yes, should their quantity, location, and condition be documented in a municipal asset management report? And on our end, on behalf of the folks from ORSIC, the answer is absolutely. Not only should roadside safety hardware be included in an asset management report, they should also be considered critical assets. And the definition of critical asset is that the asset provides an important function in service delivery. The consequence of failure can be serious. And that to me is the very definition of a road safety device. An end terminal or a steel beam guide rail system is put out onto the road network, and the important function it is serving is protecting motorists from going off the road and into potential hazard. The consequence of said end terminal or steel beam guide rail failing could potentially be a serious injury or a fatality. The evolution of our industry has happened quite rapidly. Where I look in the last 10 years at the number of roadside safety infrastructure that has been implemented provincially, and it's been incredible. I applaud the MTO and the work they have done to institute MASH as sort of a basis for crash-worthy standards of devices that are going out on their capital contracts. But I even looking at it as something as simple as the evolution of steel beam guide rail. From 1960s up until 2000, we were still using a steel beam guide rail system that consisted of wooden posts, wooden blocks, had potential for with or without a channel or rub rail underneath the rail. And then from 2000 to 2016, we started to transition into steel post guide rail, which greatly improved the installation and maintenance process, and in no way, shape, or form does it perform. It performs at the same standard that you would of the earlier crash tested products. But now we have a steel post, which is going to be far more sustainable than wood. And then the next step in the evolution of that is ensuring from 2016 to present that any new installations of steel beam guide rail, yes, they are still using a steel post, but in their configuration and their mounting height, they're now meeting MASH standards. So MASH again being the manual for assessing safety hardware. So we can see how guide rail has evolved over time, and that's just one device or piece of infrastructure of many. So I take a look at these two crash tests. The crash test on the left is a MASH steel beam guide rail system being impacted by a 5,000-pound MASH pickup truck. And the job that a steel beam guide rail system is supposed to perform is to contain and redirect that pickup truck. And in this test, it does. In the test on the right, we have a similar guide rail system, but we've moved that guide rail system closer and closer to the slope. So in this test, we find out where the limitation is for a steel beam guide rail system that passes a standard MASH pickup truck test, but when installed too close to a slope, we run into a problem. The guide rail is no longer containing and redirecting the pickup truck. That test constitutes a failure because that guide rail system particularly was installed too close to the slope. So a critical asset provides an important function in service delivery. Here you have it. The critical function that it needs to perform is containing and redirecting the vehicle. And by simply having the guide rail system outside of a context to which it was crash tested can result in a failure. So for incorporating road safety infrastructure into your asset management plans, I'll look back to Vision Zero again and say Vision Zero is a multinational strategy that promotes a commitment to the elimination of all traffic fatalities and serious injuries. When examining Vision Zero principles through the lens of road safety infrastructure, it's apparent that the overarching purposes do overlap, saving lives. So when it comes to the asset management plans of the regions and municipalities of Ontario, what steps can we take to incorporate not only these Vision Zero principles, but also incorporating road safety hardware and making sure that we're using the correct devices, meeting the current crash test standards? There's a 4-step process: awareness, implementation, training, and inspection. So on the side of awareness, it's the positive promotion of road safety infrastructure. This will bolster improved communication and understanding. The next step is implementation, ensuring that specifications are up to date and include the current road safety infrastructure. And then training, of course, for all stakeholders, which would include designers, installers, maintenance, and inspectors. And then last but certainly not least is the inspections, the actual asset management collection, where we're looking at these different devices, particularly legacy devices, and collecting data on these devices and subsequently maintaining to ensure they will perform as intended. Hardware performance. Road safety infrastructure must be installed, maintained, and regularly inspected to ensure the system will perform as crash tested. Longitudinal barriers like steel beam guide rail and cable guide rail must meet mounting height, offset requirements, slope limitations, and tension when applicable. Systems that do not meet the tolerances observed in crash test reports should be inspected and repaired accordingly. For this reason, it is of the utmost importance to include road safety infrastructure in municipal asset management plans. In these two tests, we will see how fragile it is with respect to mounting heights of steel beam guide rail, and as well as how close cable guide rail systems can be installed with respect to steep slopes. So that is a low tension cable guide rail system installed right next to a 1.5-to-1 slope. That cable system would have passed under an NCHRP Report 350 previous crash test standard, but by pushing that system back and making it too close to that slope, we have a failure. The guide rail system that failed on the left was mounted at 27.75 inches high, where under MASH, preferred mounting height for steel beam guide rail is set at 31 inches. And in that particular crash test, we had the vehicle traverse right over top. Legacy road safety infrastructure. Probably one of the topics I enjoy discussing the most, and it's a topic certainly that needs to be positively promoted and discussed internally within regions and municipalities. The province has adopted AASHTO-MASH crash testing guidelines for new roadside safety infrastructure being implemented into OPS standards. MASH is the most up-to-date guideline utilized by crash testing facilities to develop sophisticated safety technology. Road authorities across North America are reviewing MASH guidelines and slowly implementing devices. That does not mean that once a road authority has transitioned to MASH, that all their road safety infrastructure meets that guideline. Legacy road safety infrastructure can be found across the country, not just here in Ontario, not even here just in Canada, all over North America. Creating an action plan that deals with these types of devices can be challenging, but this test can be linked with an asset management plan. Here we've got some testing of legacy roadside safety devices where we have a steel beam guide rail system with channel that has been installed, and it's been impacted with a modern MASH tested truck. And on the right, we have a cable guide rail system that has been crashed into with a MASH pickup truck. And within both of these tests, we find that these legacy devices paired up versus modern vehicles, the results don't turn out the way that we had anticipated. So really interesting to see how legacy hardware operates in a world where we have a very, very changing vehicle fleet. Educational opportunity. The importance of roadside safety infrastructure training is paramount to the safe operation, maintenance, and inspection of critical safety hardware within the provincial and municipal road network. Innovations Academy offers a training portal for all road safety stakeholders, including installation, inspection, maintenance, as well as design best practices pertaining to these safety critical infrastructure devices. Understanding crash testing parameters, design consideration, and installation techniques will play a tremendous role in the development of both infrastructure safety as well as the Vision Zero initiative. So rolling back to Vision Zero, ORSIC has also created a recommendation for municipalities, a commitment, if you will, Vision Zero and road safety infrastructure. This is our Vision Zero checklist. Checklist item number 1, assess and document current road safety infrastructure. Number 2, implement current crash test guidelines under MASH. Number 3, adopt approved MTO road safety infrastructure. Number 4, conduct annual road safety infrastructure inspections. Also, exercise timely repairs of damaged/deficient road safety infrastructure. Require minimum training standards for installation, inspection, and maintenance of road safety infrastructure. Verify road safety infrastructure adequacy prior to major capital works. Update minimum maintenance standards to include road safety infrastructure. Include road safety infrastructure in asset management plans. And last but certainly not least, create a strategic upgrade plan to replace legacy road safety infrastructure. So again, this has been published in our white paper, and anybody that is looking to get a copy of this Vision Zero checklist, I would happily provide it following the session. So with that commitment to Vision Zero and road safety infrastructure, I would just like to throw it up there where we advocate and positively promote road safety infrastructure. We're looking for people to adopt the Vision Zero principles that we've laid out, as well as to adopt the varying products that have been brought into our specifications provincially that meet MASH crash test standards and sophisticated technology life-saving devices. And then last but certainly not least, we're looking for folks to invest in road safety infrastructure. These devices are put on our roadways to save lives. In summary, road safety infrastructure has a job to perform. They're tested, specified, and installed to reduce certain serious injuries and prevent fatalities on our road network in areas where we need them the most. If an asset management strategy is intended to reduce risk and provide satisfactory levels of service to the community, then how is it possible that an agency could leave safety critical infrastructure like guide rail, cable guide rail, and end terminals out of that scope? We must do our part to ensure we are specifying, inspecting, and installing these systems to ensure performance. We have the tools in the toolbox to make the roads a safer place for all road users. So let us all work together to make roads safer for all. And in this last slide here, as a last quote, road safety infrastructure is critical to the safe operation of our transportation networks and should be an essential component of every municipality's asset management plan. Dedicated long-term funding for municipalities is needed to ensure that these critical road safety devices are maintained and upgraded on a regular basis. And the image there is the cover page of our white paper. And I would encourage anybody that's interested or would like to peruse through it, feel free to reach out. I would happily send a copy. And I guess on my end, I would just like to say thank you very much for giving us some time today to discuss roadside safety infrastructure so that I could introduce you to ORSIC, the Road Safety Infrastructure Coalition, and that we could just chat a little bit more about my favorite topic, making sure that we have infrastructure devices that are out there that are saving lives. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jesse. While we wait for questions from the floor, Dan.
Celine, could I just jump in? We have a bit of a glitch with the questions. We're going to be timed out of questions, unfortunately, in about 2 minutes. So just wanted to note, please start asking your questions now. Write them down to the delegates. And hopefully we can get some questions in before it times out.
Okay. Okay. That means I get the chance to ask questions. Okay, I've got a couple of questions, Jesse. So first, thank you for the presentation. The first question is guide rail prices. Our experience recently is that the prices are going really high, double. Anything in the industry causing that?
Unfortunately, on our end, we're sort of at the mercy of the price of US steel, as well as at the price of transportation. I've been lucky enough to get down to the US probably 3 times over the last couple of weeks. And the crises that they're having right now with respect to transportation in particular, getting these products up to Ontario has been very expensive, but the unbelievably fluctuating price of steel, as well as zinc, has caused prices to skyrocket. And that is not just here in Ontario, that is North America wide. And I have seen it. I have seen it happening over particularly the last 3 months. It's been incredible, but that's why it's so important that we understand the devices that we have out there now and understand how they will perform versus the newer devices that are readily available. But you are correct. Yeah, the prices have gone up, but I'm going to say that's across the board with just about any industry.
Okay. And my second question, Jesse, is you spoke about legacy sort of roadside safety equipment. And, for example, just talking about my municipality, we have plans to replace stuff. Now, the question I wanted to ask you is, we often find that, the legacy infrastructure sometimes are in spots where you actually didn't need a guide rail. It wasn't protecting any, hazard. We find ourselves in trouble because we try to remove it because, as you know, guide rail in itself is a hazard.
Yeah.
But we find pushback on that. Any suggestions? Have you come across that?
Absolutely, yeah. With the group that I work with, we've had that so frequently that's actually through the inspection program that I run. That's one of the first questions that people are to ask themselves. So if you roll into a site and your plan is to inspect some steel beam guide rail, maybe it's for maintenance, maybe it's for your asset management plan. First question you should ask yourself is, why is the longitudinal barrier there? What is it protecting? And if that longitudinal barrier is no longer needed, an excellent case in point, I had a location on a 400 series highway where there was a run of steel beam guide rail, and I was curious as to why it was there. And then I realized that it was actually an overhead sign footing that had been cut off, that was no longer there. And so that guide rail actually becomes redundant. And I couldn't agree with you more that a steel beam guide rail in and itself is a hazard, that if the hazard is no longer there, or perhaps that hazard can be mitigated in other ways, maybe you're protecting maybe some high mast poles or some lighting poles. Maybe there's a way you could make the luminaires breakaway and remove the guide rail system. That is absolutely a solution that is there, but that is something that comes with appropriate training with respect to design, as well as the inspection of steel beam guide rail systems. So it's a great question, and one that often pops up, and everyone should always ask themselves and be curious as to, why is this guide rail here and what is it protecting? Is it still relevant? So great question. That is something where, I would push back to say that if that guide rail system can be proven that it does not need to be there, then it probably should be removed.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
Dan, anything from the floor?
Yes. We do have a question from Amanda Froese at the town of Saugeen Shores. I'll read it. For asset management plans, would you recommend a simple condition rating for existing guide rails as good, e.g. meets MASH, or poor, e.g. does not meet MASH? Would this be easy to do based on inspections? And what else do you recommend on how to incorporate this?
Okay, that's a great question. I would say 100% there should be a checkbox as to whether or not the device meets MASH, or perhaps the device meets NCHRP 350, which is a previous standard, or if the device does not meet any current crash test standards. So there's sort of a 3-tier. Is the device crash tested? Check. Is it crash tested current mass standards? Yes. If not, which standard? 350 is typically the alternative. But that is just the crash worthiness of the device itself. If you're actually inspecting the device, what I would tell any region or municipality to lean back onto would be a report that's called NCHRP Report 656. NCHRP Report 656 is the criteria for the restoration of longitudinal barrier. And if you actually want to have sort of a scale to which a guide rail system in particular would be high, medium, low with respect to its priority for repair, or if it's still in good shape, that's actually the best item that's out there right now is NCHRP Report 656, which is a document that I have readily available. It's a document that I pass along to many road authorities. And it actually tells you that if a guide rail has been impacted and the guide rail has been deflected, it'll tell you, I say inches because it's a report that comes out of the States, but it tells you in inches what the deflection rating looks like for a high, medium versus low priority for repair. So yes, for sure, identifying what crash-worthy devices you have out there should be a box to check. But I think beyond that, if you want to dial it in further for the actual condition of the device, not just the identification, I would lean on NCHRP Report 656.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. We don't have any more questions, and that could be because of the glitch we just experienced with the question period timing out. We attempted to have the vendor fix that, but the only way to fix that for this morning's session would have been to ask every delegate to log out and log back into the session. So if there are any questions that are out there that you didn't have a chance to ask, please email them to amin.menina@municipalengineers.on.ca. You see that on your screen right now. We'll get the question to Jesse and we'll get an answer for you. Just to assure everyone, we've asked the vendor to not put a time limit on the question period for the afternoon session.
Okay, thank you again, Jesse, on behalf of the MEA. And we'll be sending you a digital gift certificate for, as a token of our appreciation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. I just appreciate having the time to come on here and chat about road safety infrastructure. So have a great day. And if any questions come through, please forward them my way.
Thank you so much. So folks, this concludes the morning session. Thanks again to our platinum sponsor, Concrete Ontario. We also thank all our sponsors, platinum, gold, silver, and bronze sponsors. You can find them in the conference booklet. Please support them and visit the virtual trade floor. Again, you'll find the button on the top menu on the attendee hub. So the next section, the afternoon session, will start at 1:30. But before that, please don't go away. Please grab some lunch, visit the sponsors at the virtual trade floor, and we'll be starting a trivia game at 1 o'clock. You can find the game. If you go on the attendee hub, there'll be a networking session starting at 1. If you click on that, it'll take you to the game. And as I said this morning, there's some decent cash prizes for the first, second, and third winners. So until 1:30, we'll see you there.